The boarding announcement echoed through Terminal C while a man's lips turned blue at Lena's feet. Her promotion flight, the one that would change everything, was 30 seconds from departure. She could still make it. She could still run. But his chest had stopped moving, and nobody else was stepping forward. The crowd formed a circle, phones raised, recording instead of helping. Her luggage sat abandoned 15 feet away, her conference badge still clipped to her purse. 5 years of night shifts, 5 years of proving herself, 5 years leading to this single flight, and she was about to lose it all for a stranger whose name she didn't know. But if you want to know what happened next, if you want to see how one impossible choice at an airport changed an entire hospital system, stay with me until the very end. Like this story, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see just how far this journey has traveled. The morning had started with hope, which should have been Lena's first warning. She'd woken at 4:30 without an alarm, packed and repacked her carry-on twice, and arrived at Garrison Regional Airport 2 hours early for a 6:15 flight she'd been dreaming about for months. The International Nursing Leadership Summit in Chicago. 3 days of workshops, networking sessions, and most importantly, the announcement of the Midwest Regional Director positions that would be opening across 7 hospital networks. Lena Hart had been handpicked by Riverview Medical Center's Chief of Nursing to attend. Handpicked, encouraged, practically shoved toward this opportunity with both hands. "This is your moment," Patricia Vance had told her just last week, gripping Lena's shoulders in that fierce way she had. "You go to that summit, you make yourself visible, and you come back with that director position locked down. Riverview needs leaders like you, Lena. We need people who actually give a damn." Lena had nodded, had thanked her, had felt the weight of possibility settle onto her shoulders like a crown she hadn't yet earned but desperately wanted to deserve. Now, standing in the security line at 5:47 a.m., she mentally rehearsed her introduction for the networking breakfast. Confident, but not arrogant. Experienced, but still hungry to learn. She'd practiced in the mirror until the words felt natural, until she could say them without her hands shaking. She cleared security at 5:53. Plenty of time. Gate B7 was only a 10-minute walk. That's when she saw him. He was maybe 60 yards ahead, walking with the distinctive unsteadiness of someone who shouldn't be walking at all. Gray suit, expensive leather briefcase, salt and pepper hair carefully combed, the kind of business traveler you'd pass without a second glance. Except he'd stopped in the middle of the terminal, one hand pressed against a column, his head bowed like he was catching his breath. Lena slowed. Professional instinct, the kind you can't shut off after a decade of bedside work. The man straightened, seemed to gather himself, and continued walking. She watched him for another few seconds, then checked her phone. 5:55. She picked up her pace toward B7. She made it another 30 feet before she heard the sound. Not a scream, not a shout, just the distinct, hollow thud of a body hitting polished floor. Lena spun around. The man was down, flat on his back between a Hudson News kiosk and a closed coffee stand. His briefcase had skidded away, spilling papers across the tile. His legs twitched once, then went still. For a single frozen heartbeat, nobody moved. Then the phones came out. 6 people, maybe 8, immediately raised their smartphones. Recording, documenting. One teenager actually stepped closer for a better angle. "Call 911!" Lena's voice cut through the terminal noise as she dropped her carry-on and ran. "Someone call 911 now!" She hit her knees beside him, her hands already moving to his neck to check for a pulse. Weak, thready. His skin had that grayish-blue tint she'd seen too many times in the ICU, the color that meant oxygen wasn't reaching where it needed to go. Sir, can you hear me?" She tilted his head back, checked his airway. Clear, but his breathing was shallow, irregular, failing. Behind her, the gate announcement system chimed. "Final boarding call for Flight 1847 to Chicago O'Hare, departing from Gate B7. All passengers should be on board at this time." Lena's stomach dropped. "Did someone call 911? She shouted over her shoulder. Yeah, they're coming," a man in a pilot's uniform said, but he didn't come closer. None of them did. The patient's breathing stopped. No, come on!" Lena positioned her hands over his sternum, locked her elbows, and started compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. The rhythm was automatic, drilled into her through countless certifications and too many real-life applications. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. Repeat. His chest rose and fell under her hands. No response. "Come on," she muttered. "Don't do this. Stay with me." Somewhere past the circle of onlookers, past the phones and the whispers and the gate announcement system, she heard the final boarding call for Flight 1847. Her flight, her promotion, her entire carefully constructed future, taxiing away from the gate. Lena pressed harder into the compressions, felt a rib give slightly under her palms, cracked maybe, but that was better than dead. "Where the hell is EMS?" "They said 5 minutes," someone offered. 5 minutes. He didn't have 5 minutes. She kept going. Sweat broke out across her forehead, down her spine. Her shoulders burned. The terminal seemed to tilt around her, sounds growing distant and muffled except for the count in her head. 28, 29, 30. She tilted his head back, pinched his nose, and gave 2 rescue breaths. His chest rose, fell. Nothing. Back to compressions. A security officer appeared at the edge of her vision, radio in hand. "Ma'am, paramedics are—" "Then where are they?" Lena didn't stop, didn't look up. "Get me an AED now. There should be one on every concourse." "I'll check." "Don't check. Get it. Move." The officer ran. 30 compressions. 2 breaths. Her arms were screaming now, her lungs burning in sympathy with her patient's failed ones. The crowd had grown. Someone was filming over her shoulder, close enough that she could hear the camera's artificial shutter sound. "Back up," she snapped. "Give him space to breathe when he starts breathing." When, not if. She refused to accept if. The security officer returned with a red and white case, fumbling with the latches. Lena grabbed it from him, popped it open, and pulled out the AED with practiced efficiency. She'd done this before. Too many times. But never on an airport floor while her career evaporated 30 gates away. She ripped open his shirt, buttons scattered across tile, and placed the pads on his bare chest. The machine began its automated analysis immediately. Analyzing heart rhythm. Do not touch the patient. Lena sat back on her heels, hands raised, watching the man's face. His lips were darker now, almost purple. How long had it been? 3 minutes? 4? "Shock advised. Charging. Stand clear." She looked around. The crowd had actually pressed closer, hungry for the drama. "I said stand clear. Everyone back." They shuffled backward, barely. "Press the flashing orange button now." Lena pressed it. The man's body jerked, back arching off the floor. Then stillness. Shock delivered. Begin CPR. Her hands found his chest again. 1, 2, 3. She was crying now, she realized distantly. Tears mixing with sweat, dripping onto his ruined shirt. 4, 5, 6. "Come on, damn you, come on!" 15, 16, 17. His chest heaved under her hands. Not from the compressions. From him. From his own lungs suddenly remembering how to work. Lena froze, then immediately checked his pulse. There. Stronger now. He coughed, gagged, his eyes fluttering but not opening. "There you go," she whispered. "That's it. Keep breathing. Just keep breathing." His color was already improving, the deathly gray-blue fading to something closer to human. His breathing stabilized, shallow and rapid, but consistent. The paramedics arrived 30 seconds later, a 2-person team pushing through the crowd with a stretcher and equipment bags. Lena gave them a rapid-fire handoff. Estimated downtime, compressions delivered, single shock from the AED. Return of spontaneous circulation approximately 45 seconds ago. They took over with professional efficiency, transferring him to their monitor, establishing an IV line, preparing for transport. One of them, a woman maybe Lena's age with kind eyes, looked up at her. "You saved his life. That was incredible work." Lena nodded, numb. She stood on shaking legs, looking around at the terminal as if seeing it for the first time. The crowd was dispersing now that the show was over, already moving on with their days, their flights, their lives. Her carry-on sat abandoned 20 feet away. She walked over and checked her phone. 6:17 a.m. Flight 1847 had departed 2 minutes ago. The International Nursing Leadership Summit started tomorrow morning. She had no way to get there. The next available flight wouldn't arrive until tomorrow evening, long after the networking breakfast, long after the opening keynote, long after the director positions would have been discussed and decided. Lena sank into the nearest chair, her scrubs, she'd worn scrubs under her jacket, planning to change at the hotel, still damp with sweat and someone else's desperation. Her hands were trembling. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a hollow exhaustion that felt like grief. She'd done the right thing. She knew she'd done the right thing. So why did it feel like she'd just destroyed her own life? The security officer approached cautiously. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us for a moment. Just some paperwork, routine follow-up." "Paperwork?" Lena laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Right, of course." She followed him to a small security office tucked behind the main terminal. Standard questions. Her name, her credentials, what she'd observed, what action she'd taken. She answered mechanically, her mind elsewhere. On the flight that was now somewhere over Indiana. On Patricia Vance's face when Lena would have to explain why she'd missed the most important professional opportunity of her career. On the hospital administrator who'd approved her conference registration and travel budget, expecting her to return as a future director, not a night shift nurse who couldn't even make it onto a plane. They released her after 20 minutes. No thanks. No acknowledgement beyond the paperwork. Just a door closing behind her and the long walk back through the terminal. Lena found her carry-on where she'd left it, small miracle, and made her way to the airline's customer service desk. The line was 7 people deep. She waited, checking her phone every 30 seconds as if the situation might somehow change. It didn't. When she finally reached the counter, the agent's sympathetic smile felt like salt in a wound. "I'm so sorry, ma'am, but we can't issue a refund for a missed flight, and the change fee plus fare difference for the next available flight would be..." She consulted her screen. $840. Lena's stomach turned. She didn't have $840. Not for a flight she shouldn't have missed in the first place. Not when Riverview had already paid for the original ticket, and she'd have to explain why she needed them to pay again. "Is there anything else?" the agent asked, her smile still fixed in place. "No. Thank you." Lena walked away from the counter, away from the gates, away from everything. She found a quiet corner near an empty food court and sat down on a bench, her carry-on at her feet, her entire future crumbling around her like the destroyed shirt buttons still scattered somewhere on the terminal floor. Her phone buzzed. Email notification. From Patricia Vance, Chief of Nursing, Riverview Medical Center. Subject: Checking in. Lena: "Just wanted to make sure your flight got off okay. Text me when you land. Knock 'em dead at that breakfast tomorrow. We're all rooting for you. Patricia." Lena stared at the message until the words blurred. Then she typed a response. "Patricia, I didn't make the flight. There was a medical emergency at the airport. A man went into cardiac arrest in the terminal. I couldn't leave him. I'm so sorry." She hit send before she could second-guess it. The response came back in less than 30 seconds. "You did the right thing, but we need to talk when you're back. This complicates things." Complicates things. Professional speak for "you just torpedoed your promotion." Lena lowered her phone, pressing the heels of her hands against her eyes. She wouldn't cry. Not here. Not in public. She'd save that for her apartment, for the privacy of her own failure. "Excuse me, Ms. Hart?" Lena looked up. A different security officer, older with sergeant stripes on his uniform, stood a few feet away. "Yes?" "The patient from earlier. He's conscious now, and he's asking for you." Lena blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "The man you saved. He wants to thank you personally. His family is here, and they're requesting you come to the medical center before he's transported to the hospital." He paused. "I know it's unusual, but they were very insistent. If you have a few minutes?" She had nothing but minutes now. Minutes that should have been spent at a networking breakfast, at a summit, at the beginning of something bigger. Instead, she had an empty terminal, a missed flight, and a stranger who wanted to thank her for saving his life while her own fell apart. "Sure," Lena said, standing. "Lead the way." The airport's medical center was located in a restricted area past security, a small clinic designed for passenger emergencies. The sergeant led her through a series of corridors and locked doors, finally stopping outside a room with a small window. "They're in here," he said, then stepped back, giving her space. Lena pushed open the door. The man from the terminal was sitting upright on an examination table, oxygen cannula in his nose, IV still connected to his arm. But he was awake, alert. The deathly color had been replaced by healthy pink. He looked tired, shaken, but alive in a way he absolutely hadn't been 20 minutes ago. He wasn't alone. 3 other people filled the small room. 2 men in expensive suits, one reviewing paperwork, the other on his phone, and a woman in her 30s wearing business attire and an expression of barely controlled fear. They all turned when Lena entered. The patient studied her for a long moment, his eyes sharp despite his obvious exhaustion. Then he spoke, his voice rough but clear. "You're the nurse." "I am," Lena said. "Lena Hart. I'm glad you missed your flight." She stopped. "I'm sorry?" The man glanced at one of the suited men, who consulted a tablet. "Flight 1847 to Chicago. Departed at 6:15. You were checked in, but didn't board." A chill ran down Lena's spine. "How do you know that?" "Because," the man said, "I make it my business to know who saves my life." He extended a hand, the one without the IV. "Marcus Hale. I run Aegis Health Consortium." The name hit Lena like cold water. Aegis Health Consortium, the largest private healthcare funding organization in the region. The company that held contracts with 67 hospitals across 8 states, including Riverview Medical Center, Marcus finished, reading her expression. "Yes, I know where you work, Ms. Hart. I know you've been a night shift nurse in their ICU for 9 years. I know you were on your way to the International Nursing Leadership Summit." He paused. "And I know what missing that flight just cost you." Lena felt the floor shift beneath her feet. "I don't understand." The woman in business attire stepped forward, her expression softening slightly. "Mr. Hale was traveling to Chicago for the same summit. He's one of the keynote speakers." Was. Past tense. "Not anymore," Marcus said quietly. "I collapsed in your airport because I had a pulmonary embolism. A blood clot traveled to my lung. If you hadn't started CPR when you did, I'd be dead." The paramedic said another 60 seconds and there would have been irreversible brain damage. He looked at her steadily. "You gave up everything to save someone you didn't know, someone who couldn't give you anything in return." "I'm a nurse," Lena said simply. "It's what we do." "No." Marcus's voice hardened. "It's what you did. Most people wouldn't have. Most people would have walked onto that plane and let someone else handle it. Someone else who might not have known what to do, who might not have acted fast enough." He leaned forward slightly. "You made a choice, Ms. Hart. And that choice revealed something about your character that no resume or recommendation letter ever could." The suited man with the tablet cleared his throat. "Mr. Hale, you should rest. The transport team will be here soon to take you to Cedars-Sinai for monitoring." "In a minute." Marcus's eyes never left Lena's face. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Lena nodded slowly. "Do you know why I was flying to Chicago?" "You said you were keynoting the summit." "That's where I was supposed to be, yes, but that's not why I was traveling." He shifted slightly, wincing. "I was going to Chicago to shut down Riverview Medical Center's contract with Aegis." The room went silent. Lena's mouth went dry. "What?" "Your hospital has been under investigation for 6 months," Marcus continued. "Financial mismanagement, misuse of consortium funding, excessive administrative compensation while nursing staff work mandatory overtime, patient care metrics falling below acceptable standards." He paused. "I had the termination paperwork in my briefcase. I was going to finalize it at the summit, announce the decision to the board, and pull all Aegis funding from Riverview effective immediately." Lena couldn't breathe, couldn't process. If Aegis pulled their funding, Riverview would collapse within weeks. Layoffs, closures, hundreds of healthcare workers unemployed, thousands of patients without access to critical care. "But then," Marcus said softly, "I died in an airport terminal. And a nurse who had every reason to walk away didn't. A nurse who knew what that flight meant, what missing it would cost, and she chose to save me anyway. He looked at her with something that might have been wonder. You reminded me why any of this matters. What healthcare is supposed to be about. The woman in business attire spoke again. Mr. Hale, your daughter is outside. She's very worried. Tell her I'm fine. Tell her I'm exactly where I need to be. Marcus turned back to Lena. I'm not canceling Riverview's contract. Relief flooded through her, so intense it made her lightheaded. I'm doubling it. Lena's knees nearly gave out. You're… what? Doubling the funding, but with conditions. His expression hardened. Every administrator involved in the financial mismanagement will be removed. Immediately. Full audits, complete financial transparency. And restructuring that puts patient care and nursing staff support at the absolute center of everything Riverview does. He reached for a folder on the nearby table, wincing as the IV tugged at his arm. The suited man with the tablet quickly handed it to him. Marcus held it out to Lena. What is this? She asked. Your personnel file. Complete work history, performance reviews, certifications, everything Riverview has on record about you. He gestured for her to open it. Read the last page. Her hand shook as she flipped through the familiar documentation. Hire date, shift assignments, patient commendations, annual reviews that all said the same thing. Exceptional clinical skills. Dedicated, reliable, goes above and beyond. She reached the last page. It was a memo, dated 3 weeks ago, from Riverview's Chief Operating Officer to Patricia Vance. R.E. Leadership Summit. Attendee Patricia. Regarding your recommendation to send Lena Hart to the INLS Summit. While Ms. Hart's clinical performance is satisfactory, her lack of formal leadership experience makes her a questionable choice for director-level advancement. Additionally, her resistance to administrative directives during last quarter's staffing reductions shows concerning inflexibility. I suggest reconsidering this recommendation in favor of a candidate more aligned with organizational goals. Richard Pembroke, COO. Lena's vision blurred. She'd never seen this. Patricia had never mentioned it. She'd been sent to the summit despite administrative opposition, not because of administrative support. Patricia Vance fought for you, Marcus said quietly. She's one of the good ones. The administrators above her, they're exactly the problem we're going to fix. The suited man with the tablet stepped forward. Mr. Hale has one more thing to discuss with you, Ms. Hart, but we really do need to get him to the hospital soon. Marcus nodded. I'll make this quick. Ms. Hart, as of right now, you are officially appointed as the Director of Nursing for Riverview Medical Center, reporting directly to the Chief of Nursing and the Aegis Oversight Board. Salary commensurate with position, full administrative authority over nursing operations, and complete autonomy to implement patient care improvements as you see fit. Lena's ears were ringing. I can't. You can. You will. Marcus's expression softened. You just proved you're exactly the kind of leader healthcare needs, someone who makes the right choice even when it costs everything. Someone who sees a person in crisis and helps instead of films. Someone who understands that all the money, all the policies, all the strategic planning means nothing if we forget the actual human beings at the center of all of it. The door opened. A transport team entered with a gurney, ready to move Marcus to the hospital. We need to go, sir, one of them said. Marcus allowed them to help him onto the gurney, but he kept his eyes on Lena. You'll receive official notification within 24 hours. Patricia Vance will be briefed this afternoon. The administrative changes will begin immediately. He paused as they began wheeling him toward the door. Thank you, Ms. Hart, for my life, and for reminding me what's worth saving. Then he was gone, the door swinging shut behind the gurney and his entourage. Lena stood alone in the small medical center, holding her personnel file, trying to understand what had just happened. She'd missed her flight, lost her promotion opportunity, saved a stranger's life, and somehow, impossibly, ended up exactly where she was supposed to be. Her phone buzzed. Another email from Patricia. Lena, I just got a very interesting call from Aegis Health Consortium. Call me immediately. Lena looked at the phone, at the folder in her hands, at the empty room where a dying man had just offered her everything she'd thought she'd lost. She called Patricia. Tell me this is real, Patricia answered without preamble. Her voice was shaking. Tell me Marcus Hale really just told me he's making you director of nursing and firing half our administrative team. It's real, Lena said. At least I think it's real. I'm still trying to process. You saved his life. I did my job. No, Patricia's voice cracked. You did exactly what I've been trying to get our leadership to understand for years. You put the patient first, and it changed everything. Lena closed her eyes, felt tears finally spilling over. I missed the summit, Patricia. The summit came to you, honey, in the best possible way. A pause. Get yourself home. Rest. Monday morning, you're walking into Riverview as the director of nursing, and we're going to tear that place down and build it back the right way. The call ended. Lena made her way slowly through the airport, past the terminal where she'd knelt on cold tile and chosen a stranger over her future. The crowd was long gone. The area had been cleaned. No evidence remained of what had happened here, except for one thing. A small business card tucked under her carry-on bag's handle. She pulled it out. Heavy stock, embossed lettering. Marcus Hale, Chief Executive Officer, Aegis Health Consortium. On the back, a handwritten note in shaky script. Thank you for choosing life. Now go change lives. M.H. Lena tucked the card into her pocket and walked toward the exit, toward her car, toward Monday morning and everything that was about to change. She'd missed her flight to Chicago, but she'd caught something better. A chance to prove that doing the right thing, even when it costs everything, sometimes gives you back more than you ever imagined possible. The drive home from the airport felt surreal, like she was piloting her car through someone else's life. Lena kept glancing at the passenger seat where her carry-on sat, still packed for a trip she'd never taken. Her hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel, residual adrenaline probably, mixed with disbelief that refused to settle into acceptance. Director of Nursing. The words kept echoing in her head, foreign and impossible. She'd been a bedside nurse for 9 years. She knew how to start IVs in impossible veins, how to talk families through the worst nights of their lives, how to keep patients alive when everything was falling apart. But managing an entire nursing department? Overseeing staff assignments, budget allocations, policy implementation? She pulled into her apartment complex just after noon, the sun too bright for how disoriented she felt. Her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was watering her garden, waved cheerfully. Lena waved back automatically, wondering what Mrs. Chen would think if she knew that the quiet night shift nurse in 2B had just been handed control of a hospital's entire nursing operation. Inside her apartment, Lena dropped her bag and immediately called her mother. "Sweetheart, how's Chicago? Did you land okay?" "Mom, I didn't go to Chicago." Silence. Then, carefully, "What happened?" Lena told her everything. The collapsed man, the CPR, the missed flight, Marcus Hale and his impossible offer. When she finished, her mother didn't speak for several long seconds. "Lena Marie Hart," she finally said, voice thick with emotion. "Your father would be so proud of you." Lena's throat tightened. Her father had been a paramedic for 30 years before a heart attack took him 5 years ago. He'd taught her that some things mattered more than convenience, more than comfort, more than personal advancement. "You help the one in front of you," he used to say. "Everything else is just noise." "I know, Mom. But you're also terrified." Lena laughed, a wet sound. "Completely." "Good. That means you understand what you're taking on." Her mother paused. "When do you start?" "Monday morning, 2 days from now." "Then you'd better rest. Because from what you've told me about Riverview's administrators, they're not going to make this easy." Her mother was right, of course. Lena spent the rest of Saturday trying to sleep, failing, and finally giving up to research everything she could find about Aegis Health Consortium's intervention protocols. The documentation was dense: auditing procedures, administrative restructuring guidelines, oversight requirements. But one thing became clear. When Aegis moved to correct a hospital's operations, they moved fast and they moved hard. Sunday morning brought the official notification, an email from Aegis's Human Resources Division, formal and detailed. Her new title, her salary, nearly double what she'd been making, her start date, and attached, a confidential memo outlining the scope of administrative changes taking effect Monday morning. Lena read the memo 3 times, each pass making her stomach tighten. Richard Pembroke, Chief Operating Officer, terminated, effective immediately. David Strauss, Chief Financial Officer, terminated, effective immediately. Jennifer Wu, Vice President of Operations, placed on administrative leave pending investigation. 3 members of the Board of Directors, removed, replacements to be announced. The entire executive layer of Riverview Medical Center was being stripped away like rotted wood, and Lena was walking into the aftermath. She called Patricia Sunday afternoon. "I was wondering when you'd reach out," Patricia said, by way of greeting. "You doing okay?" "I don't know. Am I really ready for this?" "No one's ever ready, but you're capable, and you give a damn, which puts you ahead of the people we're replacing." Patricia's voice softened. "I'm not going to lie to you, Lena. Tomorrow's going to be chaos. Half the administrative staff is getting walked out. The other half is going to be scrambling, and every nurse, doctor, and support worker is going to be looking to us for answers we don't fully have yet. That's not making me feel better." "Good. You should be nervous. But you should also know this. I've spent 3 years watching you handle crisis after crisis with more grace and competence than most of our so-called leaders show on their best days. You're not taking this job because someone handed you a title. You're taking it because you earned it every single shift you showed up, every patient you fought for, every time you put people before politics." Lena closed her eyes. "What if I mess it up?" "Then we fix it together. That's what leadership actually looks like. Not perfection, but showing up and doing the work even when it's hard." Patricia paused. "Get some sleep tonight. Tomorrow we change everything." Sleep didn't come easy. Lena lay awake until past midnight, running scenarios, imagining conversations, trying to prepare for something she couldn't possibly predict. When she finally drifted off, her dreams were fragmented. Airport terminals blending into hospital corridors. Marcus Hale's gray face transforming into her patients' faces. The sound of the AED's mechanical voice repeating "shock" advised over and over. She woke Monday morning at 5:30, earlier than her alarm. For a moment, she reached for her scrubs, the automatic gesture of 9 years' worth of night shifts. Then she stopped, looking at the closet where she'd hung the professional outfit she'd bought for the Chicago summit. Navy slacks, white blouse, blazer. The uniform of someone who sat in meetings instead of changing bedpans, except that wasn't who she planned to be. Lena pulled out her scrubs, clean, pressed, the soft blue color she'd always preferred, and got dressed. Director or not, she was still a nurse. That wasn't changing. She arrived at Riverview at 6:45, parking in the employee lot she'd used for nearly a decade. The hospital looked the same as always from the outside. 6 stories of concrete and glass, the emergency department entrance busy even this early with ambulances and worried families. But as Lena walked through the main entrance, she felt the difference immediately. The administrative offices, normally quiet until 8, were ablaze with activity. Security personnel she didn't recognize stood at key points. People in suits carrying boxes moved through hallways with purposeful efficiency. And in the main lobby, a cluster of administrators stood in tight conversation, their voices sharp with barely controlled panic. Lena spotted Jennifer Wu among them, still in her VP of Operations role for now, her expression tight and angry. Richard Pembroke and David Strauss were notably absent, already escorted out, Lena assumed. She took the elevator to the 4th floor where nursing administration was located. Patricia's office door was open, light spilling into the hallway. "Come in," Patricia called before Lena could knock. The office was small but organized, walls covered with staff schedules, patient care protocols, and a few personal photos. Patricia sat behind her desk, looking exhausted but determined. 2 other people were present, a man in an expensive suit holding a tablet, and a woman with sharp eyes and an Aegis Health Consortium badge clipped to her jacket. "Lena, this is Robert Kane from Aegis's legal team, and Sarah Mendez, Interim Operations Oversight." Patricia gestured to the chairs. "They've been briefing me since 5 this morning. Sit down, we have a lot to cover." Robert spoke first, his voice crisp and professional. "Ms. Hart, congratulations on your appointment. I'll be direct. The next 72 hours will determine whether Riverview survives this transition or collapses under the weight of its own dysfunction. Aegis is committed to supporting the former outcome, but it requires complete cooperation from nursing leadership. What does that mean exactly? Lena asked. Sarah leaned forward. It means we need you to help us identify which policies and practices have been actively harming patient care versus which ones are just inefficient. We need your assessment of staffing adequacy, equipment needs, and any instances of administrative interference with clinical decision-making. She paused. And we need you to be honest even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable, Robert added. The administrators we removed today were very good at hiding problems. We're counting on the people who actually work bedside to tell us what's really happening. Lena glanced at Patricia, who nodded encouragingly. Okay, Lena said. Where do we start? They started with staffing ratios. Sarah pulled up a spreadsheet showing nurse-to-patient assignments over the past 6 months, and Lena felt her jaw tighten as she reviewed the numbers. These can't be right, she said. This shows ICU nurses managing 7 patients per shift. That's impossible. Safe ratio is 1 to 2, maybe 1 to 3 in a crisis. It's right, Patricia said quietly. They've been coding it as temporary coverage gaps to avoid regulatory flags. Temporary for 6 months? Try 18 months, Sarah said. We found documentation going back further, all classified as temporary staffing shortages, while the CFO approved executive bonuses totaling over $2 million in the same period. The anger that rose in Lena's chest was hot and sharp. She'd worked those shifts. She'd watched nurses burn out, quit, break down crying in supply closets because they couldn't possibly provide adequate care to 7 critical patients simultaneously. And the whole time, administrators had been collecting bonuses. What else? Lena asked, her voice harder now. Equipment maintenance logs revealed another problem. Critical supplies ordered at inflated prices from vendors owned by board members' family members. Defibrillator repairs delayed to save money. Medication shortages blamed on pharmaceutical supply chains when the real issue was budget reallocation toward administrative pet projects. By 9 o'clock, Lena had reviewed enough documentation to understand that Riverview's problems went deeper than simple mismanagement. This was systematic exploitation, a hospital being slowly bled dry, while the people actually providing care scrambled to keep patients alive despite impossible obstacles. I need to see the units, Lena said. I need to talk to the nurses. Patricia stood. Let's go. Sarah, Robert, will reconvene this afternoon. They took the stairs down to the 3rd floor, where medical, surgical, and telemetry units operated. The morning shift was in full swing, call lights flashing, medication carts moving through hallways, the familiar organized chaos of a hospital in motion. Patricia led Lena to the nursing station, where 4 nurses were charting, grabbing supplies, coordinating care. One of them, Ashley Chen, someone Lena had worked with for years, looked up and did a visible double-take. Lena, I thought you were in Chicago. Change of plans. Lena leaned against the counter, keeping her voice casual. How's the floor this morning? Ashley exchanged glances with the other nurses. We're managing. That's not what I asked. A pause. Then Ashley sighed. We're drowning. We're supposed to have 6 nurses on this shift. We have 4. 2 called out sick. Probably actually sick because everyone's exhausted. And management said there's no budget for per diem coverage. She gestured at the patient board. 28 patients, 4 nurses. You do the math. One of the other nurses, Marcus, no relation to the Marcus Hale, added bitterly, We got an email last week about a new patient satisfaction initiative. They want us to do hourly rounding, bedside handoff, and extended discharge education, with 7 patients each. It's insane. It's over, Lena said quietly. The nurses looked at her. What? Ashley asked. Patricia stepped forward. As of this morning, Lena is the director of nursing. And as of this morning, the administrators responsible for these staffing decisions are no longer employed here. Stunned silence. Then Marcus laughed, a disbelieving sound. You're serious? Completely serious, Lena said. Aegis Health Consortium is restructuring the entire hospital. The exploitation stops now. But I need your help. All of you. I need to know every policy that's been making your jobs impossible, every safety corner that's been cut, every time you've been told to do more with less while administrators collected bonuses. Ashley's eyes filled with tears. You mean someone's actually listening? I'm listening. We're listening, and we're going to fix this. Lena pulled out her phone. Give me your numbers, all of you. If you see something that's wrong, if you need support, if management tries to push back on changes, you contact me directly. I don't care what time it is. They spent the next hour on the unit, and the pattern repeated. Overworked nurses, inadequate supplies, impossible patient ratios, and underneath it all, a simmering frustration that had been building for months, maybe years. By 11 o'clock, Lena had a growing list of immediate priorities, but she also had something else, a nascent awareness that the nurses weren't just angry at the administrators. They were also skeptical of her. She caught the undertone in their responses, the carefully neutral expressions when she promised change. They'd heard promises before. They'd watched new initiatives get announced with fanfare and then quietly abandoned when they proved inconvenient or expensive. They wanted to believe her, but belief required more than words. Patricia pulled her aside as they headed to the ICU. You're noticing it. The doubt? Yeah. Can you blame them? They've been gaslit for months about staffing being adequate and temporary challenges. You telling them it's going to change now, that takes faith they don't have anymore. So how do I earn it? You show them, immediately, visibly, and you don't stop showing them until they believe it. Patricia's expression hardened, which means we need to have a very uncomfortable conversation with the remaining department managers about what's changing and what happens if they resist. The department manager meeting was scheduled for 1 o'clock in the main conference room. Lena spent her lunch break reviewing her notes, trying to organize the chaos of information into something resembling a coherent action plan. She barely tasted the sandwich Patricia brought her. At 12:55, they walked into the conference room together. 12 department managers sat around the long table, supervisors for each unit, shift coordinators, specialty department leads. Most of them looked nervous. A few looked defiant. Jennifer Wu sat at the far end, her position as VP still technically active pending investigation, her expression radiating hostility. Patricia called the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. I know today has been disruptive, and I know many of you have questions. Before we begin, I want to introduce Riverview's new Director of Nursing, Lena Hart. The room's energy shifted, attention focusing on Lena with varying degrees of curiosity, skepticism, and from Jennifer Wu, outright disdain. Lena stood, keeping her voice steady. I'm not going to waste time with platitudes. You all know Riverview has serious problems. Patient care has been compromised by cost-cutting that prioritized administrative bonuses over clinical needs. Nursing staff has been pushed to unsafe limits while being told their concerns weren't valid. That ends today. Jennifer laughed, a sharp sound. That's a nice speech, but you've been a bedside nurse for 9 years? And now you think you can walk in here and restructure an entire hospital's operations? That's not how this works. Lena met her eyes. You're right. I don't have administrative experience, but I have something you apparently don't, actual understanding of patient care and what it requires to deliver it safely. Understanding doesn't pay bills or manage budgets. Neither do executives who funnel hospital funds into their own pockets while nurses work 7 patient assignments. Lena kept her voice level, but the anger underneath was clear. I've seen the documentation, Jennifer, the vendor contracts, the budget reallocations, the falsified staffing reports. So let me be very clear. This isn't a debate. These are the changes that are happening with or without your cooperation. She pulled up a presentation on the room's screen, slides Sarah and Robert had prepared, showing the immediate restructuring plan. Effective immediately, nurse-to-patient ratios will return to safe, evidence-based standards. That means 1:2 in ICU, 1:4 in med-surg, 1:5 in telemetry. No exceptions. We're hiring 23 additional nurses, and Aegis is covering the cost. One of the managers, Tom Brennan, night shift coordinator, raised his hand. Where are we getting 23 qualified nurses? The hiring process takes months. Aegis is expediting credentialing and background checks. We're also offering sign-on bonuses and competitive pay increases to attract experienced staff. Lena clicked to the next slide. Equipment maintenance. All deferred repairs will be completed within 30 days. All supply shortages will be addressed immediately. Any manager who tries to delay or deny needed resources will answer directly to me and to Aegis oversight. She saw Jennifer's expression darken further, but continued. Policy changes. The hourly rounding initiative is suspended indefinitely. Bedside handoff remains encouraged, but not mandatory. Discharge education will be supported by dedicated patient navigators, not added to nursing workload. And any future policy changes will be developed in consultation with bedside nurses, not imposed from administration. The room was silent now, the managers absorbing the scope of what she was announcing. Tom spoke again. Honestly, it sounds too good to be true. What's the catch? The catch, Patricia said, is that we're going to be held accountable. Aegis isn't just throwing money at problems and walking away. We'll have quarterly audits, patient outcome reviews, and staff satisfaction assessments. If we can't demonstrate improvement, the funding gets pulled and Riverview closes. So we need everyone in this room to be all in on making this work. Lena added, and if anyone in this room is more interested in protecting old ways of doing things than in improving patient care, you need to leave now. This is not optional. This is not negotiable. Jennifer stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly. This is a mistake. You're going to bankrupt this hospital within 6 months, and when it fails, it'll be on your head. She grabbed her bag. I won't be part of this disaster. You're already on administrative leave, Patricia reminded her. You're not part of anything except the investigation into financial mismanagement. Jennifer's face flushed red. We'll see what the board has to say about this. The board members who weren't removed this morning have already approved these changes, Lena said quietly. You don't have allies here anymore, Jennifer. You have consequences. Jennifer stared at her for a long moment, then walked out, slamming the door behind her. The remaining managers sat in uncomfortable silence. Finally, Tom spoke. I'll be honest, a lot of us have wanted changes like this for years, but we've also seen a lot of big promises that turned into nothing. How do we know this is different? Lena sat down, meeting his eyes. You don't. Not yet. But you will. Because I'm not making promises from an office. I'm going back to the units. I'm working shifts alongside you. And every decision we make, every policy we implement, is going to start with one question. Does this help nurses provide better patient care? If the answer is no, we don't do it. She looked around the table. I know I'm unproven. I know this is overwhelming. But I also know that every person in this room became a healthcare professional because they wanted to help people. So help me help you do that. Tell me what you need. Tell me what's broken. And then let's fix it together. The meeting continued for another hour, managers gradually opening up about the obstacles they'd faced, the workarounds they'd developed, the compromises they'd hated making. Lena took notes, asked questions, and started building a picture of a hospital that had been barely holding together through the sheer determination of its frontline staff. By 3 o'clock, when the meeting finally ended, she was exhausted but energized. This was possible, hard, overwhelming, maybe impossible to perfect, but possible. Patricia walked her back to the nursing administration office. You did well in there, especially with Jennifer. I probably should have been more diplomatic. No, you should have been exactly what you were. Direct, honest, and unwilling to accept excuses. Patricia paused outside her office door. But you should also know Jennifer's not done. She has connections on the remaining board. She's going to push back, and it's going to get ugly. Let her try, Lena said. I didn't save Marcus Hale's life just to watch this hospital keep dying from corruption. She spent the rest of the afternoon in meetings with unit supervisors, reviewing staffing schedules, and beginning the process of posting job openings for the new nursing positions. Sarah and Robert checked in periodically, offering support and answering questions about Aegis protocols. At 6:30, long past when she'd normally be waking up for a night shift, Lena finally headed to her car. The parking lot was quiet. The evening shift settled into their routines inside. She was unlocking her car when she heard footsteps behind her. Miss Hart? Lena turned. A woman stood a few feet away, late 40s, wearing scrubs and an exhausted expression Lena recognized immediately. Night shift nurse, probably just arriving for her shift. Can I help you? Lena asked. I'm Diane Morris, ICU night shift. I've worked here for 16 years. She hesitated. I heard about what happened today. The changes you're making. News travels fast. This is a hospital. Gossip is our primary communication method. Diane smiled slightly, then her expression turned serious. I wanted to say, thank you. I've been thinking about quitting for months. The staffing is unsafe. I've filed incident reports, talked to supervisors, even tried going to the board. Nothing changed. I started looking at other hospitals, even though leaving would mean losing seniority, pension contributions, everything. Lena waited, sensing there was more. But if what you're saying is true, if things are really going to change, then maybe I don't have to leave. Maybe I can actually do my job the way it's supposed to be done. Diane's voice cracked slightly. I became a nurse to help people, not to watch them suffer because I'm stretched too thin to give them the care they deserve. Things are going to change, Lena said firmly. I can't promise it'll be perfect or immediate, but I promise it'll be real. Diane nodded, blinking back tears. Okay, then I'll stay, and I'll help however I can. She walked toward the hospital entrance, leaving Lena standing alone in the darkening parking lot. This was why it mattered. Not the title, not the salary, not the professional advancement. It was Diane Morris and nurses like her. People who dedicated their lives to caring for others and deserved to work in a system that supported them instead of exploiting them. Lena got in her car and headed home, her mind already racing ahead to tomorrow's challenges. Hiring 23 nurses, restructuring schedules, addressing equipment needs, navigating the political minefield of hospital administrators who'd lost their power. Her phone buzzed as she pulled into her apartment complex. Text message from an unknown number. Congratulations on your promotion, Ms. Hart. I'm sure you're very proud of yourself. Enjoy it while it lasts. A friend. Lena stared at the message, ice spreading through her chest. The threatening tone was clear. So was the implication that someone was watching, waiting for her to fail. She forwarded the message to Patricia with a brief note. Got this tonight. Should I be worried? Patricia's response came within seconds. Screenshot it and send to Robert at Aegis Legal. And Lena, be careful. People who lose power don't always accept it gracefully. Lena sat in her car, engine still running, staring at the anonymous threat on her screen. She thought about Diane Morris, about Ashley Chen and Marcus, and every other nurse who'd been working in impossible conditions. She thought about Marcus Hale, dying on an airport floor, trusting a stranger to save him. She typed a reply to the unknown number. I'm not going anywhere. Then she deleted it, knowing engagement would only encourage whoever sent it. Instead, she forwarded the message to Robert as instructed, locked her car, and headed inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Resistance from displaced administrators, skepticism from exhausted staff. The enormous pressure of proving that this restructuring was real, sustainable, worth the chaos it was causing. But tonight, for the first time in years, Lena felt like she was exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do, even if someone out there wanted to make sure she failed. The anonymous threat stayed with Lena through a restless night, replaying in her mind every time she started to drift off. By Tuesday morning, she'd given up on sleep entirely, arriving at Riverview before 6 with coffee that had gone cold during the drive and a determination that felt brittle around the edges. The hospital was different now in ways both obvious and subtle. The administrators who used to arrive mid-morning were conspicuously absent, their offices dark. Security personnel with Aegis badges checked IDs at key access points, and the energy among the nursing staff carried a tentative, fragile hope that made Lena's chest tight with the weight of not disappointing them. Patricia was already in her office, reviewing staffing projections with Sarah Mendez. You look terrible, Patricia said without preamble. Good morning to you too. I'm serious. Did you sleep at all? Lena set her coffee down. Someone threatened me last night. I'm having trouble pretending that's not concerning. Sarah looked up sharply. Robert told me about the text. We're trying to trace it, but it was sent through a burner app. Untraceable without a subpoena, and even then it's unlikely. She paused. Are you scared? I'm angry, Lena said. Which is probably healthier. Or more dangerous. Patricia stood, moving to close the office door. We need to talk about what's happening. The real situation, not the sanitized version. Lena sat down, suddenly uneasy. Okay. Sarah pulled up a document on her tablet. Jennifer Wu filed a formal complaint with the State Board of Health yesterday afternoon. She's alleging that Aegis's intervention violates hospital governance protocols and that the terminations were executed without proper cause or due process. That's insane. The financial documentation is solid. We have evidence. We have legal justification, but Jennifer's not trying to win on merit. She's trying to create enough chaos and public doubt to force Aegis to back down. Sarah's expression hardened. And she's not working alone. 3 of the removed board members are filing a joint lawsuit claiming breach of fiduciary duty. Lena felt the ground shift beneath her. Can they do that? They can try, Patricia said. Will they succeed? Probably not. But they can tie us up in legal proceedings for months. They can generate negative press. They can make donors and community partners nervous about supporting Riverview during the transition. So what do we do? Robert Kane appeared in the doorway as if summoned. We stay the course. We document everything. We make the improvements so visible and so impactful that public opinion shifts decisively in our favor. He entered, closing the door behind him. But Ms. Hart, you need to understand, you're now the face of this restructuring. Jennifer and her allies are going to target you specifically. They'll look for any mistake, any vulnerability, any reason to claim you're unqualified or incompetent. I didn't ask to be the face of anything. I just wanted to help fix the problems. Too late for modesty, Robert said bluntly. You're the narrative they're fighting against. The bedside nurse who stood up to corruption and won. That story threatens their credibility and their legal position, so they need to destroy it, which means they need to destroy you professionally. The words landed like physical blows. Lena had spent 9 years deliberately staying below the radar, doing good work without seeking attention, building quiet competence instead of flashy credentials. Now she was being thrust into a spotlight that felt more like a target. How do I protect myself? She asked. You do your job flawlessly, Sarah said. You implement these changes faster and more effectively than anyone expects. You turn Riverview around so completely that their legal arguments look absurd in comparison to the reality on the ground. No pressure then. Patricia touched her shoulder. You're not alone in this. We're all targets now. We all have stakes in making this work. A knock on the door interrupted them. Tom Brennan, the night shift coordinator, looked apologetic. Sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation in the ICU. Lena, you should probably see this. They followed him down to the ICU, where a small crowd had gathered around the nursing station. As Lena approached, she saw what had drawn their attention. A bulletin board normally used for shift schedules now displayed something else entirely. A printout of Lena's employment history, heavily annotated in red ink. Every job change, every certification, every performance review, all marked up with sarcastic commentary. 9 years, same position, no ambition or no ability. Rejected for charge nurse role 3 times. Why? Promoted only after sleeping her way to the top? The last comment was circled multiple times with an arrow pointing to a photo clearly taken from social media. Lena at a restaurant with Marcus Hale and several other Aegis executives from a dinner meeting she'd attended last week to discuss implementation timelines. The implication was obvious and disgusting. Lena felt her face burn hot, then cold. Around her, nurses were staring, some in shock, some in embarrassment, a few with expressions that suggested they were considering whether the accusations might be true. Who put this up? Patricia's voice was deadly quiet. Tom shook his head. No idea. It was here when night shift ended. Security footage is being reviewed now. Lena reached for the board, intending to tear it down, but Robert stopped her. Don't. This is evidence. We document it exactly as it is, then remove it properly. He was already photographing the display with his phone. This crosses from professional sabotage into harassment, possibly defamation. I don't care about legal categories, Lena said, her voice shaking. I care that my staff is seeing this garbage. Ashley Chen stepped forward from the gathered crowd. For what it's worth, nobody who actually works with you believes that crap. She glared at the board. We know why you got promoted. Because you're good at your job and you actually give a damn about patients. A few other nurses murmured agreement, but Lena noticed the ones who stayed silent, the sideways glances, the uncertainty. Doubt was a poison that spread fast, and whoever created this board knew exactly what they were doing. Robert carefully removed the display, sliding it into a large evidence envelope. Ms. Hart, I need you to come with me. We're filing a formal complaint and getting a restraining order if we can identify the responsible party. The rest of the morning dissolved into meetings with lawyers, security personnel, and hospital administration. The security footage showed a figure in scrubs and a surgical mask posting the board at 4:30 a.m., deliberately keeping their face hidden and their movements brief. Impossible to identify definitively, though the body language suggested someone familiar with the hospital layout. By noon, Lena had given 3 separate statements, signed 4 legal documents, and developed a headache that pulsed behind her eyes like a second heartbeat. She was finishing a conference call with Aegis's corporate legal team when Patricia stuck her head into the office. You need to see this, now. Lena followed her to the 4th-floor break room, where a television was tuned to the local news. A reporter stood outside Riverview's main entrance, microphone in hand, speaking with practiced concern. Allegations of impropriety surrounding the controversial leadership changes at Riverview Medical Center. Former VP of Operations Jennifer Wu released a statement this morning claiming that Director of Nursing Lena Hart engaged in inappropriate relationships with Aegis Health Consortium executives in exchange for her recent promotion. Lena's vision tunneled. On screen, the reporter continued. Wu provided these photos to our station, showing Hart dining with Aegis CEO Marcus Hale and other company officials. Wu claims the promotion violates hospital ethics policies and demonstrates favoritism that undermines legitimate governance. Riverview and Aegis have not yet responded to requests for comment. The screen cut to a statement from Jennifer Wu herself, professionally styled and positioned in front of what looked like a law office. I'm speaking out because the nurses and patients of Riverview deserve better than leadership appointed through personal connections rather than merit. This isn't about resistance to change. It's about ensuring accountability and ethical standards. Patricia turned off the television. Robert's team is drafting a response. But Lena, this is going to spread. Social media, other news outlets, professional nursing forums. By tonight, your name is going to be associated with this accusation everywhere. Lena sat down heavily. I had dinner with Marcus and his team because we were discussing implementation logistics. There were 7 people at that table. It was a working meeting. I know, everyone who matters knows. But Jennifer doesn't need the truth to stick, she just needs the doubt. Patricia's expression was grim. This is exactly what Robert warned about. They're trying to make you the scandal instead of the solution. So what do? You go back to work. You implement the changes we promised. You show everyone watching that you're here for the right reasons. Patricia paused. And you trust that the truth will win eventually. What if it doesn't? Then we fight harder. Lena spent the afternoon doing exactly that, fighting harder. She met with the hiring committee to review applications for the new nursing positions. She walked through each unit, talking with staff about supply needs and schedule adjustments. She sat with the ethics committee to discuss protocols for preventing harassment and protecting whistleblowers. Every interaction felt weighted now, colored by the knowledge that people were wondering if the allegations were true. Some nurses treated her the same as always. Others were noticeably cooler, more distant. A few avoided making eye contact entirely. By 5 o'clock, Lena was physically and emotionally exhausted. She was packing up to leave when her phone rang. Marcus Hale's name appeared on the screen. She answered, Mr. Hale. I saw the news. His voice was tight with anger. This is unconscionable. I'm having Aegis's communications team issue a statement immediately, and I'm personally calling every media outlet in the city to set the record straight. Will that help or make it worse? Marcus was silent for a moment. I don't know. But I won't let them destroy your reputation with lies. You saved my life, Lena. The least I can do is defend yours. I appreciate that, but maybe the best defense is just doing the work, proving them wrong through results instead of arguments. That's a long game, and in the meantime, you're taking damage. I can handle damage. Lena surprised herself with how much she meant it. What I can't handle is abandoning the changes we promised because things got difficult. You're remarkable, Marcus said quietly. Most people in your position would be looking for the exit by now. I'm not most people. After the call ended, Lena sat alone in her office, still barely familiar, still feeling like someone else's space, and allowed herself 5 minutes of complete stillness. 5 minutes to feel the weight of it all. The threats, the accusations, the pressure, the stakes. Then she stood up, straightened her scrubs, and went back to work. Wednesday morning brought news that the State Board of Health had opened a formal inquiry into the allegations against her. Not a finding of wrongdoing, just an investigation. But the headlines didn't make that distinction clear. Riverview Nursing Director under ethics investigation. Questions mount over hospital leadership changes. Aegis restructuring faces growing scrutiny. Lena read them all during her morning coffee, each one a fresh cut. Then she set her phone aside and headed to the 7 a.m. staff meeting she'd scheduled. The conference room was packed, nearly 40 nurses from all shifts, departments, and experience levels. Some had come in early, some had stayed late. All of them looked tired, uncertain, and wary. Lena stood at the front of the room, no notes, no presentation, just her and 40 pairs of eyes waiting to see what she'd say. I know what you've heard. I know what's being reported. And I know some of you are wondering if any of it is true. She met their gazes directly. So let me be completely clear. I have never engaged in any inappropriate relationship with Marcus Hale or any Aegis executive. The dinner that's being shown in photos was a working meeting with 7 people present, discussing implementation timelines for the changes we're making here. Anyone who suggests otherwise is lying. The room was absolutely silent. But I also understand why you might doubt that. You don't know me well. Most of you have seen me around the hospital for years but never worked closely with me. I'm asking you to trust someone who's essentially a stranger, and that's not reasonable to expect. Lena paused. So I'm not going to ask for your trust. I'm going to earn it. Ashley Chen, sitting in the front row, spoke up. How? By showing up every day, by making the changes we promised and not backing down when it gets hard, by being available, transparent, and accountable. Lena pulled out her phone, held it up. Every person in this room has my direct number. You see a problem, you call me. You need support, you call me. You think I'm making a mistake, you call me and tell me. I'm not here to be your boss. I'm here to support you in doing your jobs the way they should be done. Tom Brennan raised his hand. What about the investigation? What happens if they find against you? Then I'll deal with the consequences. But until and unless that happens, I'm here, I'm working, and I'm fighting for you. She looked around the room. I know some of you are scared. I know change is overwhelming, especially when it's this fast and this drastic. But I also know that every single person in this room became a nurse because they wanted to help people. So help me help you do that. Diane Morris, the ICU nurse who'd approached Lena in the parking lot, stood up. I've been at Riverview for 16 years. I've seen a lot of administrators come and go, and I've heard a lot of promises that turned into nothing. But I've also never seen anyone fight for us the way Lena is fighting right now. She's taking hits meant to destroy her career, and she's still showing up. Diane looked at her colleagues. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm with her, until she gives me a reason not to be. One by one, other nurses nodded. Not all of them, not even most of them, but enough to matter. The meeting continued for another hour, nurses raising concerns, asking questions, offering suggestions. Lena took notes, made commitments, and felt the first fragile threads of actual teamwork beginning to form. As people filed out, Ashley lingered. That was brave, addressing it head-on instead of hiding. Hiding wasn't an option, and ignoring it would have just let the poison spread. Lena rubbed her eyes. I just hope it's enough. It's a start. The rest we figure out together. By Thursday afternoon, the first wave of new hires began orientation. 15 experienced nurses brought in through Aegis's accelerated recruitment program. Competitive salaries, sign-on bonuses, and most importantly, the promise of adequate staffing and administrative support. Lena spent 3 hours with them, outlining expectations, answering questions, and getting a feel for who they were. Most seemed genuinely excited about the opportunity. A few were clearly desperate for any job after being burned out at other facilities. One, a sharp-eyed ICU specialist named Catherine Reeves, asked the question Lena had been waiting for. What happens if this restructuring fails? If Aegis pulls out and we're all unemployed in 6 months? Then we all look for new jobs together, Lena said honestly. But I don't plan to fail, and neither should you. Catherine studied her for a long moment. Fair enough. But for the record, I've read about you. The allegations, the controversy, all of it. And I'm still here because I think you're getting railroaded by people protecting their own corruption. So don't prove me wrong. I'll do my best. That evening, Lena was finishing paperwork when Patricia appeared in her doorway, her face ashen. We have a problem. A big one. Lena's stomach dropped. What now? Marcus Hale was just readmitted to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, another pulmonary embolism. He's in critical condition. The floor seemed to tilt. How is that possible? He was on anticoagulants. He was being monitored. I don't know the details yet. But Lena, if he dies... Patricia didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. If Marcus died, Aegis's commitment to Riverview would be thrown into question. A new CEO might decide the restructuring wasn't worth the controversy. The funding could be pulled. Everything they'd built in less than a week could collapse overnight, and Lena would be left holding the debris. I need to go see him, Lena said, already grabbing her bag. That's probably not a good idea. The optics... I don't care about optics. He saved my career and I saved his life. If he's dying, I'm not going to stay away because Jennifer Wu might take another photo. Patricia didn't argue further. Lena drove to Cedars-Sinai with her heart in her throat, hands too tight on the steering wheel. The hospital's ICU was on the 8th floor, and she had to talk her way past 2 security checkpoints before reaching the waiting area where Marcus's family had gathered. His daughter, the woman from the airport medical center, recognized Lena immediately. You're the nurse from the airport. I am. I heard about your father. I wanted to... I don't know. I just needed to be here. The daughter's eyes were red from crying. He was doing well. The doctors said he was recovering perfectly. Then this morning he collapsed at home. Another clot, they think, despite the medication. Her voice broke. They're operating now, trying to remove it. But the surgeon said... He said we should prepare ourselves. Lena sat down beside her, the hospital waiting room achingly familiar. How many times had she been on the other side of this, giving updates to terrified families, watching them wait for news that might destroy them? Your father is a fighter, Lena said quietly. I saw that in the airport. He didn't give up then, and he won't give up now. You don't know that. No. But I know he's surrounded by excellent medical care, and I know he has people who love him fighting for him. That matters. They sat together in silence, 2 women who barely knew each other, bound by the thread of a man's fragile life. 2 hours later, a surgeon emerged, still in scrubs, expression carefully neutral. He made it through the surgery. We removed the clot successfully, but he's extremely weak, and the next 48 hours are critical. We're keeping him heavily sedated while his body recovers. The daughter sagged with relief. Can I see him? Soon. We're getting him stabilized in ICU first. As the surgeon left, the daughter turned to Lena. Thank you for being here. You didn't have to be. Yes, I did. Lena stood. Tell him we're still fighting at Riverview. The changes are happening. He needs to wake up so he can see what we're building. She left Cedars-Sinai as night settled over the city, exhausted beyond words. Her phone buzzed constantly, texts from Patricia, emails from Robert, notifications about news coverage. She ignored all of it until she was home, doors locked, finally alone. Then she allowed herself to cry. For Marcus Hale, fighting for his life again. For the nurses depending on her to not fail them. For her own reputation being shredded by people who cared more about power than truth. For the impossible weight of trying to fix a broken system while that same system tried to crush her. She cried until she had nothing left. Then she washed her face, made tea she didn't drink, and opened her laptop. If Marcus died, she needed to be ready. She needed documentation showing exactly what had been accomplished, what was in progress, what would be lost if Aegis pulled their support. She needed evidence that this restructuring was working, that the nurses and patients were already seeing improvements, that abandoning it now would be abandoning real progress. She worked through the night, compiling data, organizing testimonials from staff, documenting every policy change and its measurable impact. By dawn, she had a comprehensive report that painted an undeniable picture. Riverview was changing. Patient outcomes were improving. Staff morale was rising. The corruption was being rooted out. And Lena Hart, the supposedly unqualified bedside nurse who'd slept her way to promotion, was making it happen. Friday morning, she walked into Riverview running on caffeine and pure determination. The security guard at the entrance, a new face, another Aegis hire, nodded respectfully. "Ms. Hart, heard about Mr. Hale. Hope he pulls through." "Me too." Patricia was waiting in the nursing administration office with Sarah and Robert. All three looked like they'd slept as little as Lena had. "Marcus is stable," Robert said immediately. "Still critical, still sedated, but stable. The medical team is cautiously optimistic." Lena felt some of the tension ease. "That's something. But we have another problem." Sarah pulled up a document on her tablet. "Jennifer Wu and her legal team filed an emergency injunction this morning. They're trying to halt all restructuring activities pending resolution of the ethics investigation against you." "Can they do that?" "They can try," Robert said. "The hearing is Monday morning. We'll oppose it, obviously, but there's a real chance the judge grants a temporary hold just to avoid the appearance of prejudging the investigation." Lena sat down slowly. "So everything stops. The hiring, the staffing changes, the equipment upgrades, all of it." "Potentially. For weeks, maybe months. The nurses will quit. The ones who stayed because they believed change was coming, they'll leave if it looks like we're being blocked." Patricia leaned forward. "Which is exactly what Jennifer wants. Create enough chaos and delay that the restructuring collapses under its own weight, then point to the failure as proof she was right all along. We can't let that happen." "We might not have a choice," Sarah said quietly. "If the judge grants the injunction, we're legally obligated to comply." Lena looked at the three of them, professionals, experts, people who understood hospital administration and legal systems far better than she did. They were telling her the situation was out of their control, that external forces were going to determine whether everything they'd built would survive. She refused to accept it. "What if we don't need to convince a judge?" Lena asked. "What if we convince the public instead?" Robert raised an eyebrow. "What are you suggesting?" "Jennifer's winning because she's controlling the narrative. She's making this about ethics violations and improper promotions. But what if we shift the conversation? Make it about patient care and nurse safety and corruption. Make it so visible and so compelling that a judge can't ignore it without looking like they're protecting the people who were exploiting the system?" "That's a huge gamble," Patricia said. "If it backfires, it makes everything worse. And if we do nothing, we lose anyway." Lena pulled out her phone, opened her contacts. "I know reporters. I know patient advocacy groups. I know nurses who've been documenting unsafe conditions for months. What if we give them all a platform, show the city exactly what was happening at Riverview and exactly what we're trying to fix?" Sarah was already shaking her head. "Aegis Corporate will never approve going public like that. Too much risk." "Then I'll do it myself, as Lena Hart, Director of Nursing, not as an Aegis representative." She looked at Robert. "Can they fire me for speaking publicly about patient safety concerns?" "Technically, no. Legally, you're protected for whistleblowing about unsafe conditions, but politically," he trailed off. "Politically, I'm already being destroyed. What do I have to lose?" The room fell silent. Finally, Patricia spoke. "If you do this, there's no taking it back. You'll be declaring war on Jennifer and everyone supporting her. They'll come at you with everything they have." "Let them," Lena said. "I'm tired of playing defense. Time to remind everyone what this is actually about." She spent Friday afternoon reaching out to every contact she had, reporters who'd covered healthcare issues, patient advocates, professional nursing organizations, even the nurses she'd worked with over the years who'd witnessed the problems firsthand. She pitched them a story, the real story of what had been happening at Riverview and what was being done to fix it. By evening, 3 news outlets had agreed to interviews. A patient advocacy group wanted to organize a press conference, and a prominent nursing union leader offered to provide testimony supporting the restructuring. Lena was coordinating logistics when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then, thinking it might be related to one of her media contacts, she picked up. "Lena Hart." "You should have stayed quiet." The voice was distorted, mechanically altered, but the threat was unmistakable. Who is this? Someone who knows what you're planning, the press conference, the interviews. You think going public will save you? A harsh laugh. It'll destroy you. We have documentation you've never seen, evidence of negligence, patient complaints, incidents you thought were buried. We release it, and you don't just lose your job, you lose your license. Lena's blood ran cold. You're bluffing. Am I? Keep pushing, and you'll find out. Back down now, resign quietly, and maybe you walk away with your career intact. Keep fighting, and we bury you so deep you never practice nursing again. The line went dead. Lena sat frozen, phone still pressed to her ear, the mechanical voice echoing in her mind. Documentation, evidence, incidents. What were they talking about? She'd always been meticulous, always followed protocols, always put patient safety first, but 9 years of bedside work meant thousands of interactions, hundreds of critical decisions made under pressure. Had there been something she'd missed? Some complaint filed that she'd never heard about? Some documentation error that could be twisted into evidence of incompetence? Her hands were shaking. Patricia appeared in the doorway, took one look at Lena's face, and closed the door behind her. What happened? Lena told her about the call, about the threats, about evidence she didn't know existed. Patricia's expression darkened. This is intimidation, classic scorched earth tactics. But what if they're not bluffing? What if there really is something, Then we deal with it. But Lena, you can't let them scare you into silence. That's exactly what they want. They're threatening my license, Patricia, my entire career. I know. Patricia sat down across from her. And I'm not going to tell you what to do. This is your call, your risk. But I will tell you this. I've reviewed your entire personnel file, every incident report, every patient interaction, every documented decision you've made. You're one of the most careful, competent nurses I've ever worked with. If they have evidence against you, it's either manufactured or so twisted out of context, it's meaningless. You can't be sure of that. No, but I'm sure of you, and I'm sure that backing down now means Jennifer and everyone like her wins, means corruption stays hidden, means nurses keep working in unsafe conditions, and patients keep suffering. Patricia leaned forward. Only you can decide if that's worth the risk to your career. Lena closed her eyes, thinking about Diane Morris, who'd almost quit. About Ashley Chen fighting impossible patient ratios. About Marcus Hale dying on an airport floor because someone had to choose between helping and walking away. She'd made her choice then. She was making it again now. Schedule the press conference, Lena said, for Monday morning before the injunction hearing. Patricia smiled grimly. I'll make the calls. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Lena worked with the advocacy groups to coordinate messaging, rehearsed her statement, and gathered supporting documentation. Saturday night, she got a text from Cedars-Sinai. Marcus Hale was awake, stable, and asking for updates. She called his daughter. He wants to know if you're giving up, the daughter said, a smile in her voice. Tell him absolutely not. Tell him we're going on a fence. Sunday evening, Lena stood in her apartment reviewing her notes one final time. The press conference was scheduled for 8 a.m., the injunction hearing at 10. In less than 12 hours, she'd either cement the restructuring's legitimacy or destroy her own credibility completely. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. A photo appeared on screen. Lena stared at it, confusion giving way to ice-cold recognition. It was a patient chart. From 6 years ago. A medication error, wrong dosage administered, caught and corrected before harm occurred, properly documented and reported. She remembered it vividly because she'd been devastated, had nearly quit over the guilt despite the patient being fine. But in the photo, someone had altered the documentation, made it look like she'd tried to hide the error, made it look like the patient had suffered complications, made it look like negligence instead of an honest mistake properly handled. Another text appeared. 8 a.m. tomorrow, you announce your resignation. Or this goes to the Board of Health. Your choice. Lena's vision blurred. This was it. The evidence they'd threatened. Fabricated, falsified, but convincing enough to destroy her if people wanted to believe it. She could resign, walk away, protect her license and her future. Or she could fight, knowing they'd release the falsified documentation and she'd have to prove it was altered while defending herself against ethics violations and trying to implement a hospital restructuring. Her phone rang. Patricia. I just got the same photo, Patricia said without preamble. It's fake. The original documentation is in the archives. I'm pulling it now. Will that matter? Once it's public, we make sure the truth gets out first. At the press conference, we show the original, show the fake, and expose them for manufacturing evidence. Patricia's voice was steel. But Lena, if we do this, we're burning every bridge. No more negotiations, no more compromise. Total war. Lena looked at the falsified chart on her phone, at the lies masquerading as truth, at the choice between fighting and fleeing. She thought about the nurse she'd been at that airport terminal, the one who'd seen someone dying and decided their life mattered more than her own comfort. That nurse wouldn't back down now. Get the original documentation, Lena said. We're going to war. Patricia arrived at Lena's apartment at midnight with a file box and a lawyer Lena had never met. This is Martin Cross, Patricia said, setting the box on Lena's kitchen table. He specializes in healthcare fraud and defamation. Robert recommended him. Martin was mid-50s, gray suit despite the hour, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. He opened the box and pulled out a patient chart sealed in a protective sleeve. This is the original documentation from the medication incident 6 years ago, he said, laying it beside Lena's phone showing the falsified version. Notice the differences. Lena leaned closer. The original showed exactly what she remembered. Error caught immediately. Corrective action taken. Patient monitored with no adverse effects. Incident reported through proper channels. The fake version had altered timestamps, added fabricated complications, and removed the documentation of her immediate correction and reporting. Whoever made this knew enough about medical documentation to make it look plausible, Martin said. But they made mistakes. The handwriting doesn't match samples from that time period. The paper stock is wrong. This hospital switched vendors in 2021, but this supposedly 2019 document is on the newer paper. And most importantly, the original is logged in the hospital's archive system with a digital timestamp that can't be faked. Will that be enough to prove it's falsified? Lena asked. In court? Absolutely. In the court of public opinion? Martin's expression was grim. That's harder. People believe what confirms their existing suspicions. If someone wants to think you're incompetent, they'll focus on the fake and dismiss the original as cover-up. So what do? We get ahead of it. At the press conference tomorrow, we don't just present the truth, we present the crime. We show that someone committed fraud to destroy your career. We make the story about their corruption, not your alleged misconduct. Patricia was scrolling through her phone. The patient from this incident, Mrs. Eleanor Marsh. She's still alive, still local. I have her contact information from the hospital database. You want to call a patient at midnight? Lena said. I want to ask if she'll speak at the press conference tomorrow morning and confirm that she received excellent care despite a minor medication error that was immediately corrected. Patricia was already dialing. Sometimes the best defense is a grateful patient. The call went to voicemail. Patricia left a message explaining the situation and requesting a call back. Then she made 3 more calls, to nurses who'd worked with Lena that day, to the pharmacy supervisor who'd been involved in the incident review, to the hospital's quality assurance director who'd signed off on the final report. By 1 a.m., they had commitments from 2 of the 3. The pharmacy supervisor and the QA director both agreed to provide statements confirming the incident had been handled properly. We're building a wall of credibility, Martin explained. Multiple sources, documentary evidence, expert testimony. We make it impossible for rational people to believe the fake. But what about irrational people? Lena asked. Those we ignore. Can't win everyone. We just need to win enough. They worked through the night, preparing materials, drafting statements, coordinating with the patient advocacy group sponsoring the press conference. At 4:30 a.m., Patricia's phone rang. This is Eleanor Marsh, a elderly voice said when Patricia answered on speaker. I got your message. What's this about someone lying about my care? Patricia explained the situation, the falsified documentation, the allegations against Lena, the attempt to use Mrs. Marsh's case as evidence of incompetence. There was a long silence, then Then Marsh spoke, her voice trembling with anger. That nurse saved my life. Not from the medication error, that was nothing, barely a blip, but from the pneumonia I developed 2 days later. She noticed my breathing changing before anyone else did. Got the doctors in immediately. They said if she'd waited even an hour, I might not have made it. A pause. You tell me when and where to be tomorrow. I'll set those liars straight. Lena felt tears burning her eyes. Mrs. Marsh, you don't have to. Yes, I do, because if they're willing to lie about me to hurt you, what else are they lying about? Who else are they hurting? The elderly woman's voice hardened. I'll be there, and I'll bring my daughter who's a healthcare attorney. Let's see them argue with both of us. The press conference was scheduled at the Riverside Community Center, neutral ground away from the hospital. Lena arrived at 7:15 to find the parking lot already filling. News vans, photographers, people with cameras, and notepads. Inside, the advocacy group had set up a small stage with a podium and microphones. Chairs filled the room, at least 80 of them, most already occupied. Lena recognized faces, nurses from Riverview, patient family members, a few city council representatives, reporters from every major outlet, and in the back row, trying to be inconspicuous, Jennifer Wu, with two people Lena assumed were her lawyers. She's here to control the damage, Patricia murmured, or to gather ammunition. Either way, she's watching. At 7:45, Eleanor Marsh arrived with her daughter. She was tiny, maybe 80 pounds, using a walker but moving with determined energy. Her daughter, professional in a navy suit, carried a briefcase that suggested she meant business. Where do you want me? Mrs. Marsh asked Lena. You don't have to do this. I don't want to put you through. Stop. I'm here because it matters. Now where do I sit? They seated Mrs. Marsh in the front row where cameras could easily see her. Martin Cross did a final review of materials with Lena, checking that she had the original documentation, the fake version, and the supporting statements all organized. At 7:58, the patient advocacy group's director took the podium. Good morning. Thank you all for coming. We're here today to discuss a critical issue affecting healthcare in our community, the difference between accountability and character assassination, between reform and retaliation. She introduced Lena, who approached the podium on legs that felt disconnected from her body. The lights were blinding, the microphones too close, the room too full of people waiting to judge whether she was a hero or a fraud. She gripped the podium and began. 6 days ago, I missed a flight that would have advanced my career. I missed it because a man collapsed in front of me at the airport, and I chose to save his life instead of boarding my plane. That man was Marcus Hale, CEO of Aegis Health Consortium. He survived because of CPR I provided until paramedics arrived. Cameras flashed. Reporters typed furiously. Lena continued. What you may not know is why Mr. Hale was traveling that day. He was going to terminate Riverview Medical Center's contract with Aegis because of financial mismanagement, unsafe staffing practices, and systematic exploitation of nursing staff while administrators collected excessive bonuses. My actions at the airport changed his mind. He decided instead to restructure Riverview, remove corrupt administrators, and invest in proper patient care and staff support. She clicked to the first slide, documentation of the staffing violations, the budget misallocations, the safety incidents that had been minimized or hidden. This is what was happening at Riverview. Nurses forced to manage 7 ICU patients simultaneously when safe practice is 1 to 2. Equipment repairs delayed to fund administrative retreats. Supply shortages while executives received million-dollar bonuses. This isn't opinion. This is documented fact verified by Aegis audits and state regulatory records. Jennifer Wu shifted in her seat. One of her lawyers whispered something urgent. The administrators responsible for these conditions were removed. Some have filed lawsuits claiming improper termination. Others have made allegations against me personally, suggesting my appointment as director of nursing was based on inappropriate relationships rather than merit. Lena clicked to the next slide, the photo from the restaurant, the one Jennifer had given to media outlets. This photo shows a working dinner with 7 Aegis executives discussing implementation logistics. It has been presented as evidence of impropriety. What it actually shows is professional collaboration to fix a broken system. She paused, letting that sink in, then clicked to the next slide. But perhaps more concerning is this. The falsified patient chart appeared on screen. Gasps rippled through the room. Lena explained the medication incident, her immediate correction, the proper reporting, the patient's full recovery. This is documentation of that incident, allegedly from our hospital archives. It shows negligence, attempted cover-up, and patient harm. There's only one problem. It's fake. She clicked again. The original chart appeared alongside the fake, differences highlighted in red. This is the actual documentation. Notice the differences. Wrong paper stock, incorrect handwriting, fabricated complications. Someone created a false patient record to destroy my credibility and halt the Riverview restructuring. Martin stood, approaching the podium with the sealed original. This document has been verified by forensic analysis. The fake version was created recently using scanned copies and digital alteration. We have testimony from the original pharmacy supervisor, the quality assurance director, and most importantly, the patient herself. Eleanor Marsh stood, supported by her daughter. I'm Eleanor Marsh, that's my chart being lied about up there. And I'm here to tell you that Nurse Hart gave me excellent care. The medication error was minor, immediately corrected, and caused no harm whatsoever. But 2 days later, I developed pneumonia and Nurse Hart caught it before it became critical. She quite possibly saved my life. The elderly woman's voice rang clear across the room. So whoever created that fake document isn't just lying about a nurse. They're lying about my care, my health, my life, and I won't stand for it. The room erupted. Reporters shouting questions, cameras swinging between Lena and Mrs. Marsh. In the back, Jennifer Wu was on her phone, her face ashen. Lena raised her hands for quiet. I'm not here to play victim or to attack others. I'm here because nurses and patients deserve better. They deserve healthcare systems that prioritize care over profit, that support staff instead of exploiting them, that tell the truth instead of manufacturing lies. She clicked to the final slide, preliminary data from the first week of restructuring. Patient satisfaction scores up, staff overtime hours down, safety incident reports increasing, which she explained was good news. More incident reports means nurses feel safe speaking up about problems instead of hiding them. It means we're identifying issues before they harm patients. It means transparency is replacing fear. Lena looked directly at the cameras. The restructuring at Riverview is working. Patients are getting better care. Nurses have adequate support. The problems are being fixed. But there are people who benefited from the old system, who don't want transparency or accountability, who are willing to fabricate evidence and destroy reputations to protect their own interests. She pulled out her phone, displayed the threatening text messages she'd received. These threats were sent to intimidate me into resigning. They didn't work. The fake documentation was created to discredit me professionally. It won't work. Because the truth matters more than convenience, and patients matter more than politics. A reporter raised her hand. What do you say to Jennifer Wu's allegations that your appointment was based on favoritism? I say that my entire employment history is public record. 9 years of documented excellent patient care. Multiple attempts at advancement blocked by the same administrators who were removed for corruption. I was promoted because I proved I could do the work, and because someone finally gave me the chance despite others trying to prevent it. Lena paused. As for favoritism, ask yourself who benefits from questioning my credentials. Ask who's trying to maintain a system that harms patients. Ask who's manufacturing evidence instead of defending their record with facts. Another reporter. Will you pursue legal action against whoever created the false documentation? Martin stepped forward. We're filing police reports for fraud and identity theft. We're pursuing defamation claims against anyone who knowingly distributed false information, and we're requesting a full investigation into the source of these materials. The questions continued for 30 minutes. Lena answered them all, supported by Patricia, Martin, and Mrs. Marsh. By the time the press conference ended at 9:15, the narrative had shifted completely. This wasn't about an unqualified nurse sleeping her way to promotion. This was about corruption fighting back against reform. About administrators willing to commit fraud to protect their exploitation of healthcare workers. About one nurse who refused to back down when threatened. They left the community center surrounded by cameras, reporters still shouting questions. Lena climbed into Patricia's car, hands shaking with residual adrenaline. That was incredible, Patricia said, pulling out of the parking lot. You destroyed their entire case. We destroyed it together. Lena checked her phone, messages flooding in, from nurses at Riverview, from other hospitals, from professional organizations offering support, and one from Marcus Hale's daughter. My father watched the live stream from his hospital bed. He says you just reminded him why he believes in people. Keep fighting. They arrived at the courthouse at 9:50 for the 10 a.m. injunction hearing. The hallway outside the courtroom was packed. Aegis lawyers, hospital representatives, Jennifer Wu and her legal team looking significantly less confident than they had an hour ago. Robert Kane was waiting with Sarah Mendez and 3 other Aegis attorneys. You just made our job much easier, Robert said quietly. Judge will have a hard time granting an injunction when the ethics allegations are exposed as fabricated. They'll pivot, one of the other lawyers warned. Argue procedural violations or governance issues. Don't expect them to concede. They filed into the courtroom at 10, Judge Margaret Corrigan presiding, 60-something and reportedly no nonsense. Jennifer's legal team presented first, arguing that Aegis's restructuring violated hospital bylaws and that Lena's appointment circumvented proper hiring procedures. Then Aegis's team presented their response, methodically dismantling each argument with documentation and legal precedent. But the real shift came when Judge Corrigan asked about the ethics investigation. I've been made aware of this morning's press conference, the judge said. Allegations that the evidence against Ms. Hart was fabricated. Counsel for the petitioners, do you have a response? Jennifer's lead attorney stood. Your Honor, the ethics investigation is a separate matter. Our petition concerns governance and procedural. Your petition specifically references Ms. Hart's alleged ethical violations as justification for the injunction. If those violations are based on false evidence, your entire argument collapses. Judge Corrigan looked stern. Do you have any legitimate evidence of misconduct, or was this petition filed in bad faith? The attorney hesitated. Your Honor, we're still investigating the source of... That's what I thought. The judge turned to Aegis's team. Mr. Kane, I assume you're requesting dismissal with prejudice? We are, Your Honor, and we're prepared to file counterclaims for abuse of process if petitioners continue this harassment. Judge Corrigan made a note. Petition for injunction is denied. Petitioners are ordered to cease any further legal action related to this matter unless they can provide substantive evidence not based on fabricated documentation. This court will not be used as a weapon to intimidate healthcare workers attempting to improve patient care. She looked directly at Jennifer. Ms. Wu, if evidence emerges that you personally created or knowingly distributed false documents, I will refer this matter to the State Attorney General for criminal prosecution. Do I make myself clear? Jennifer's face went white. Yes, Your Honor. Good. We're adjourned. Outside the courtroom, reporters who'd rushed from the press conference swarmed them immediately. Robert handled most questions with professional non-answers, but one reporter pushed through to Lena directly. Ms. Hart, what's your next step? Back to work? I never left work, Lena said. I'm director of nursing at Riverview Medical Center, and that's exactly where I'm going now. The drive back to the hospital felt surreal. In less than 4 hours, Lena had exposed corruption, proved her innocence, defeated a legal challenge, and shifted public opinion completely. But the larger question remained, would it last? Patricia seemed to read her thoughts. You know this isn't over. Jennifer and the others will regroup. They'll find new angles. Let them. Every day they spend fighting us is another day we make Riverview better. Eventually, the results will speak louder than their accusations. They arrived at the hospital to find something unexpected. A crowd gathered outside the main entrance. Not protesters. Supporters. Nurses in scrubs holding signs that read, "We stand with Lena," and patient care over politics. Patients and family members. Community members. At least 50 people. Maybe more. Ashley Chen spotted Lena's car and waved. The crowd turned, and suddenly they were applauding. Lena got out slowly, overwhelmed. Ashley approached with a sign that read, "Bedside to Leadership, Earned Not Given." We watched the press conference, Ashley said. All of us. And we wanted you to know you're not alone in this. Diane Morris appeared beside her. You fought for us. Now we fight for you. They walked into the hospital together, the crowd following. Energy electric. In the lobby, more staff waited. Doctors, technicians, administrative support, even some board members who'd survived the purge. Patricia leaned close to Lena. This is what victory looks like. Not a court ruling or a press conference. This. They made their way to the 4th floor where nursing administration was located. Sarah was waiting with news. The State Board of Health just issued a statement. They're closing the ethics investigation against you, citing lack of credible evidence. They're also opening their own investigation into the falsified documentation and who created it. Do we know who yet? Lena asked. Not definitively, but hospital IT tracked the access logs for the archival system. Someone pulled Eleanor Marsh's original chart 3 weeks ago using administrative credentials that belonged to David Strauss, the former CFO. He was already terminated. Why would he? Revenge, Robert said, joining them. Or he was working with Jennifer to build a case against you before the restructuring even started. Either way, he's looking at criminal charges now. Fraud. Tampering with medical records, possibly conspiracy. The pieces were falling into place. The administrators hadn't just been corrupt. They'd been actively planning to destroy anyone who threatened their system. Lena had become their target the moment Marcus Hale chose to support her instead of terminating Riverview's contract. What happens now? Lena asked. Sarah smiled. Now you do your actual job. The restructuring continues. We have 16 more nurses starting next week. Equipment orders are being processed. Patient care metrics are already improving measurably. She paused. And the board has asked if you'd be willing to present at their next meeting about expanding the nursing leadership model to other departments. They want to apply this approach hospital-wide. They want to apply it everywhere. You proved it works. The rest of Monday dissolved into a blur of meetings, interviews with remaining media outlets, and coordination with the nursing staff. By evening, Lena was back in her office, still not quite feeling like her office, reviewing schedules and supply requests. Tom Brennan knocked on the open door. Got a minute? Sure. What's up? The night shift coordinators wanted me to ask you something. We know you were nights for 9 years. We know you understand those challenges better than anyone. He hesitated. Would you consider doing a monthly night shift, not supervising, just working floor, staying connected to the actual work? Lena felt something settle in her chest, a rightness she hadn't felt since accepting the director position. Yes, absolutely yes. When do we start? This Friday, if you're willing. ICU, your old unit. I'll be there. After Tom left, Lena sat alone for a moment, letting the day finally catch up with her. The press conference, the hearing, the crowd outside, the victory that still felt fragile, like something that could shatter if she exhaled too hard. Her phone buzzed, text from an unknown number, and her stomach clenched reflexively. But this message was different. I owe you an apology. I was wrong about you. Catherine Reeves. Lena smiled, remembering the new ICU nurse who'd questioned her at orientation. She typed back, "No apology needed. Skepticism is healthy. Come find me Friday night shift. Let's talk about building something that lasts." She was packing up to leave when Patricia appeared with Robert and Martin Cross. "We have a development," Patricia said. "David Strauss just turned himself into police. He's cooperating with investigators in exchange for a plea deal." "That's good, right?" Lena asked. "It's complicated," Martin said. "He's claiming Jennifer Wu directed him to create the false documentation, that she provided the template and he just executed it. She's claiming he acted alone and is lying to reduce his sentence. So it's his word against hers. Except," Robert added, "hospital security footage shows Jennifer entering the building the same day the false chart was accessed, using David's badge. She wasn't supposed to have access anymore. She'd been placed on leave. But someone gave her credentials, and she used them." Lena felt cold. They were working together, planning this for weeks. Longer, probably. We found email exchanges between Jennifer and several removed board members discussing contingency strategies if Aegis didn't withdraw support. Your appointment was the trigger that activated their plan. What happens to Jennifer? She'll be arrested tomorrow morning. Fraud, conspiracy, possibly obstruction if we can prove she tried to interfere with the investigation. Martin's expression was grim. She's looking at serious prison time if convicted. Lena should have felt satisfaction, victory, justice. Instead, she just felt tired. She could have worked with us, Lena said quietly. She has experience, connections, institutional knowledge. If she'd embraced the changes instead of fighting them, she could have been part of rebuilding something better. Some people can't accept losing power, Patricia said, even when holding on to it destroys them. They left Lena's office together, walking through hallways that felt different now, cleaner somehow, lighter, like a weight had been lifted. Nurses worked with visible relief instead of grinding exhaustion. Patients received care without the underlying tension of a system stretched to breaking. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't finished, but it was better. Lena said goodbye to Patricia and the lawyers in the parking lot, climbed into her car, and finally allowed herself to acknowledge how close she'd come to losing everything. One different choice at that airport terminal. One moment of hesitation, one decision to prioritize her own advancement over a stranger's life. And none of this would have happened. She drove home thinking about the butterfly effect of moral choices, how one act of decency had cascaded into systematic change, how saving a life had somehow saved a hospital. Her apartment felt quiet after the chaos of the day. Lena made tea, changed into comfortable clothes, and opened her laptop to check final emails before attempting sleep. One message stood out. From Marcus Hale, sent 20 minutes ago. Lena, I'm being discharged tomorrow. Doctors say I'll make a full recovery. Again. Thanks to excellent medical care and stubborn refusal to quit. My board asked me to convey their support for everything you're doing at Riverview. You're changing how we think about healthcare leadership across our entire network. Also, I'm told I owe you a flight to Chicago whenever you're ready. The summit invitation is open-ended. Marcus Lena typed a response. Focus on recovery. Chicago can wait. Riverview needs me here, and honestly, I think I need it too. This is where I belong. She hit send, then noticed one more unread message. From an address she didn't recognize, subject line simply, The Truth. Her finger hovered over delete. After the fabricated documents and threatening texts, she wanted nothing to do with anonymous messages. But something made her open it. Ms. Hart. You don't know me, but I worked at Riverview in finance for 12 years. I was let go last year after questioning budget discrepancies. I was told it was performance issues, but I knew it was retaliation. I have documentation of everything. The vendor kickbacks, the falsified reports, the offshore accounts where administrators were hiding embezzled funds. I was too scared to come forward before. But watching what you did today gave me courage. I'm ready to testify. If you want the complete truth about what was happening at Riverview, I can provide it. Thomas Chen. Lena stared at the screen, reading the message 3 times. This wasn't over. This was just beginning. The corruption at Riverview went deeper than improper bonuses and unsafe staffing. It went to criminal embezzlement, systematic fraud, years of exploitation hidden beneath administrative bureaucracy. And Thomas Chen, whoever he was, had the evidence to prove all of it. Lena forwarded the email to Robert and Martin with a brief note. Received this tonight. Legitimate or trap? Robert's response came within minutes. We'll verify. If real, this changes everything. The investigation expands, more arrests likely. Prepare for another storm. Lena closed her laptop and sat in the quiet darkness of her apartment, processing what was coming. She'd wanted to fix Riverview's nursing department, to improve patient care and support her colleagues. Simple goals. Achievable goals. Instead, she'd stumbled into something much larger, a systematic dismantling of institutional corruption that had infected the hospital for years, maybe decades. And now, apparently, she was going to see it through to the end. Her phone buzzed one final time. Text from Patricia. Thomas Chen is real, former finance manager. Forced out in 2023 after raising concerns about CFO's budget practices. If his documentation is legitimate, we're talking about millions in embezzled funds. This is going to get very big, very fast. Are you ready? Lena looked around her small apartment, thinking about the quiet life she'd had just 6 days ago. Night shifts, minimal drama, comfortable anonymity. That life was gone, burned away in an airport terminal when she'd chosen a stranger's survival over her own convenience. What remained was this, a fight she hadn't asked for but couldn't abandon, against corruption she'd accidentally exposed, alongside people who'd become allies in a war she was only beginning to understand. She typed her response to Patricia. "I'm ready. Let's finish this." But even as she sent it, Lena wondered what finishing would actually mean and what price she'd ultimately pay for choosing to fight instead of flee. Outside her window, the city lights glittered in the darkness, indifferent and eternal. Inside, Lena Hart, bedside nurse turned reluctant revolutionary, prepared for whatever storm was coming next. The storm arrived faster than Lena anticipated. Thomas Chen met with Robert and Martin on Tuesday morning in a conference room at Aegis headquarters, 3 hours away from Riverview. Patricia attended via video conference. Lena drove up personally, arriving to find a nervous man in his 40s clutching a laptop bag like a life preserver. "Mr. Chen," Robert said, gesturing to a chair. "Thank you for coming forward." Thomas sat, hands shaking slightly as he pulled out an external hard drive. "I've been carrying this for 18 months. Every financial record, every questionable transaction, every piece of evidence I could gather before they forced me out." He looked at Lena. "I watched what they did to you. The fake chart, the threats. I realized if I didn't speak up now, I never would." Martin connected the hard drive to a laptop, and for the next 4 hours they reviewed documentation that painted a picture of systematic embezzlement spanning 7 years. Vendor contracts awarded to shell companies owned by board members' relatives. Equipment purchases at inflated prices with kickbacks funneled into offshore accounts. Grant money designated for patient care diverted to executive bonuses and personal expenses disguised as business costs. The total exceeded $8 million. "This is criminal enterprise," Robert said quietly, scrolling through bank statements showing regular transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands. RICO charges, wire fraud, money laundering. We're not talking about hospital mismanagement anymore. We're talking about organized crime. Thomas nodded. David Strauss was the architect, but he had help. Jennifer Wu handled the vendor relationships. Richard Pembroke approved the fraudulent budget reports. And 3 board members, Gerald Martinez, Susan Chow, and Vincent Palmer, received direct payments in exchange for voting approval on the contracts. "Do you have proof of the payments?" Martin asked. Thomas pulled up another folder. Bank records showing wire transfers from the shell companies to personal accounts belonging to all 3 board members. Hundreds of thousands of dollars each over multiple years. Lena felt sick. While nurses worked double shifts and patients went without adequate care, administrators had been stealing millions and hiding it behind bureaucratic complexity. "Why didn't you go to authorities when you first discovered this?" Robert asked. "I tried. I filed a report with the hospital's ethics hotline. It went to Richard Pembroke, who was part of the scheme. He called me in, said I'd misunderstood the documentation, and suggested I drop it if I valued my job." Thomas's voice cracked. 2 weeks later, I was terminated for performance issues that never existed before I started asking questions. I had a mortgage, 2 kids in college. I couldn't afford to fight them. "But you can now," Lena said quietly. "Now the whole city is watching. Now there's accountability. Now someone's actually listening." Thomas looked at her. "You made that possible. You stood up when it was easier to walk away." They spent the rest of the day organizing the evidence, preparing criminal referrals, and coordinating with law enforcement. By evening, federal investigators were involved. By Wednesday morning, arrest warrants were being prepared. Lena returned to Riverview Tuesday night to find the hospital transformed yet again. Word had spread about the embezzlement investigation. Staff who'd been skeptical about the restructuring now understood the depth of corruption they'd been working under. The anger was palpable. Nurses who'd stretched themselves to breaking while millions were stolen, patients who'd suffered inadequate care while executives enriched themselves. Ashley found Lena in her office at 9 p.m. "Is it true? $8 million? At least. Possibly more as investigators dig deeper. And we were told there was no money for proper staffing, no budget for equipment upgrades, no funding for wage increases." Ashley's hands clenched into fists. "They let people suffer while they got rich. I know, and they're going to pay for it." Wednesday morning brought the arrests. Federal agents took David Strauss into custody at his home at 6 a.m. Jennifer Wu was arrested at her attorney's office an hour later. Richard Pembroke was picked up at the gym. The 3 board members were arrested at their workplaces in coordinated actions designed to maximize visibility. By noon, every news outlet in the state was covering the story. Riverview Hospital executives arrested in $8 million embezzlement scheme. Federal prosecutors charge 5 in healthcare fraud case. Nurse who exposed hospital corruption now vindicated. Lena watched the coverage from her office, Patricia beside her. On screen, federal prosecutors held a press conference outlining the charges. Conspiracy, wire fraud, money laundering, racketeering. If convicted, each defendant faced decades in prison. "This is because of you," Patricia said. "None of this gets exposed without you fighting back. This is because of Thomas Chen having the courage to come forward, because of Marcus Hale choosing reform over termination, because of nurses who refused to accept that unsafe conditions were normal." Lena shook her head. "I just happened to be in the right place at the right time." "No, you made the right choice at the critical moment. Everything else followed from that." The hospital board held an emergency meeting Wednesday afternoon. Lena was invited to attend along with Patricia and Sarah Mendez representing Aegis. The remaining board members, the ones who hadn't been arrested, looked shell-shocked and defensive. Board Chair Margaret Willis spoke first. "We need to address the public perception crisis. Donations are being pulled. Community partners are distancing themselves. We need a response that restores confidence." "You need transparency," Lena said. "Complete financial audits, public reporting, external oversight. Anything less looks like you're hiding more corruption." One of the members, Dr. Philip Marsh, bristled. "We're not all corrupt. Some of us had no idea what was happening." "Then prove it. Open every book. Invite scrutiny. Show the community you're committed to actual reform, not damage control." Margaret looked at Sarah. "What does Aegis recommend?" "Full transparency, independent audits, regular public reporting, and significant restructuring of board governance to prevent this from happening again." Sarah pulled up a document on the screen. "We're proposing that 50% of board positions be filled by community representatives, including former patients, family members, and frontline healthcare workers. No more executive insiders controlling oversight." "That's radical," Dr. Marsh said. "So was embezzling $8 million, Lena replied. "Radical problems require radical solutions." The board voted to accept Aegis's recommendations. Not unanimously, 2 members resigned rather than accept the new governance structure, but the majority understood they had no choice. Trust had to be rebuilt from the ground up. By Thursday, the legal proceedings had begun. David Strauss, facing the most serious charges, agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony implicated not just his co-defendants, but also several vendors and contractors who'd participated in the kickback schemes. Jennifer Wu refused to cooperate. Her attorney issued a statement claiming she was a scapegoat for male executives' crimes, that her role had been minimal, that she was being prosecuted more harshly because she'd spoken out against Aegis's restructuring. The argument might have gained traction except for the bank records showing she'd personally received over $600,000 in fraudulent payments, and the emails Thomas Chen provided showing her directing David Strauss on how to structure the shell companies to avoid detection. By Friday, Jennifer's attorney had stopped returning media calls. Lena worked her first night shift as director that Friday evening, returning to the ICU where she'd spent 9 years. The unit looked different with proper staffing, 6 nurses for 12 patients, a sustainable ratio that allowed for actual patient care instead of crisis management. Catherine Reeves was working that night, along with Diane Morris and several nurses Lena had worked with for years. They treated her like one of them, not like management, which was exactly what Lena needed. At 2 a.m., a patient coded. Lena was first to respond, muscle memory taking over as she started compressions while Catherine grabbed the crash cart. They worked together seamlessly, decades of combined experience coordinating without words, hands moving in practiced rhythm, everyone knowing their role. They got the patient back. Pulse restored, breathing stabilized, crisis averted. Afterward, in the quiet of the staff break room, Catherine said, "You didn't have to work the floor. You're director. You could just supervise." "I could, but then I'd forget what this actually feels like, the weight of it, the stakes, the reality that every policy decision I make affects real people in real crisis." Lena looked at her hands, still slightly shaky from adrenaline. I never want to become the kind of administrator who forgets that. You won't, Diane said from across the room, because you were one of us first. You know what it costs to do this work. That's why we trust you. Saturday morning, Lena attended the first community forum organized by the restructured board. Over 300 people filled the hospital auditorium: patients, families, healthcare workers, community advocates, reporters. Margaret Willis opened by acknowledging the betrayal of trust. For years, this hospital was run by people who prioritized personal gain over patient care, who stole from the community they were supposed to serve, who exploited dedicated healthcare workers while enriching themselves. Her voice was steady but emotional. That ends now. Complete transparency, external oversight, community control. We're rebuilding Riverview the right way, and we're doing it with your input. Lena presented next, outlining the nursing improvements already implemented and the additional changes planned. Proper staffing ratios, equipment upgrades, professional development programs, mental health support for staff dealing with burnout and trauma. We've hired 32 new nurses in 2 weeks, Lena said. We've reduced mandatory overtime by 60%. Patient satisfaction scores have increased 23%. Safety incident reports are up 40%, which means staff feel safe identifying problems before they harm patients. She paused. This is what's possible when we prioritize people over profit. The audience applauded. Then the questions began. A woman in her 60s stood. My mother died at Riverview 3 years ago. Sepsis that wasn't caught in time because the nurses were stretched too thin. If these changes had been in place then, would she still be alive? Lena felt the question like a physical blow. I can't answer that definitively, but I can tell you that proper staffing allows nurses to notice subtle changes in patients' conditions earlier, to spend time with patients instead of rushing between rooms, to provide the vigilant care that prevents complications. She met the woman's eyes. I'm sorry about your mother, and I'm committed to making sure other families don't experience that loss because of preventable system failures. The woman sat down, wiping tears. More questions followed. About financial accountability, about preventing future corruption, about whether the changes would last once media attention faded. Lena answered honestly, I can't guarantee perfection, but I can guarantee commitment. This restructuring isn't a PR campaign. It's a fundamental reimagining of what this hospital stands for, and we're going to keep fighting for it every single day. The forum lasted 3 hours. By the end, the mood had shifted from anger and skepticism to cautious hope. Sunday brought unexpected news. Marcus Hale was being discharged from Cedars-Sinai and wanted to visit Riverview before returning home. He arrived by private car at 2 p.m., still moving carefully but looking remarkably healthy for someone who'd nearly died twice in 2 weeks. His daughter accompanied him, along with 2 Aegis executives. Lena met them in the main lobby, where hospital staff had gathered despite it being their day off. Word had spread that Marcus was visiting, and people wanted to see the man whose near death had catalyzed everything. Ms. Hart, Marcus said, shaking her hand, I'm told I have you to thank for still being alive. Again. Just doing my job, both times. Your job is now director, but you're still working bedside shifts. Someone has to remember what the work actually looks like. Marcus smiled. This is exactly why the restructuring is working. You haven't forgotten where you came from. He turned to address the gathered staff. I came here today to see firsthand what's being built, to meet the people making it happen, and to make an announcement. He nodded to one of the Aegis executives who pulled out a folder. Aegis Health Consortium is establishing the Riverview Excellence Fund, a $50 million endowment dedicated to nursing education, professional development, and innovation in patient care. The fund will be administered by a committee composed primarily of frontline healthcare workers, not executives. Its purpose is to ensure that the reforms implemented here become permanent and sustainable. Shocked silence, then applause that built to a roar. Marcus continued. Additionally, the Riverview model, community oversight, frontline worker leadership, transparent governance, is being adopted across all 67 hospitals in Aegis's network. What started here as a response to crisis is now becoming the standard for how we believe healthcare should operate. He looked directly at Lena. One nurse, one choice, one moment of integrity, and it changed an entire healthcare system. That's the power of doing the right thing even when it costs everything. The applause intensified. Lena felt tears burning her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Not yet. Not in front of everyone. Marcus spent 2 hours touring the hospital, talking with staff, visiting patients, seeing the changes in action. Before he left, he pulled Lena aside. "Thank you," he said simply, "for my life, for this hospital, for reminding me why I got into healthcare in the first place. Thank you for taking the risk, for believing reform was possible. The risk was all yours. I just had the resources to support it." He paused. "What's next for you? Director is impressive, but I suspect you're capable of more." Lena thought about it. "Honestly, I want to stay here, do this work, build something sustainable. Maybe eventually teach others how to create similar change in their hospitals. But for now, Riverview needs me, and I need it." "Then that's exactly what you should do." Marcus shook her hand one final time. "But when you're ready for the next challenge, Aegis will be waiting. We need leaders like you." Monday morning, exactly 2 weeks after the airport terminal, the missed flight, the CPR that started everything, Lena arrived at Riverview to find media trucks once again filling the parking lot. But this time, they weren't there for scandal. They were there for success. A national healthcare magazine was featuring Riverview's transformation as their cover story. From corruption to excellence, how one hospital rebuilt itself in 2 weeks. Multiple news outlets were requesting interviews. Professional nursing organizations were asking Lena to speak at conferences. Patricia found her in her office grinning. "You're famous, the face of healthcare reform." "I'm a nurse who did CPR and refused to be quiet when threatened. That's not heroic, it's basic human decency." Which apparently is rare enough to be newsworthy. Patricia sat down. "How are you holding up?" "Really?" Lena considered the question. 2 weeks ago, she'd been an anonymous night shift nurse preparing for a career summit that might advance her position. Now she was directing an entire nursing department, testifying in federal investigations, appearing in national media, and fielding job offers from hospitals across the country. "I'm exhausted," she admitted, "overwhelmed. Sometimes I still can't believe any of this is real." She paused. "But I'm also more fulfilled than I've ever been. This work matters. These changes matter, and I get to be part of building something that actually helps people. That's all that counts." The federal trial began in March, 3 months after the initial arrests. Lena testified for 2 days, walking the jury through how the embezzlement had affected patient care, how the corruption had endangered lives, how the cover-up had nearly destroyed her career when she tried to expose it. David Strauss testified against his co-conspirators, detailing the scheme's operations. Thomas Chen provided the documentary evidence that made conviction inevitable. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts for all 5 defendants, Jennifer Wu received 15 years. The 3 board members got between 8 and 12 years each. David Strauss, because of his cooperation, received 7 years but would be eligible for parole after 4. The sentences made headlines. Riverview executives face decade-plus in prison. Healthcare fraud case results in historic sentences. Hospital corruption scandal ends with justice. Lena watched the verdict announcement from her office at Riverview, Patricia and Sarah beside her. She felt no joy in seeing Jennifer led away in handcuffs, just a profound sadness that it had come to this, that people had chosen greed over integrity, that they'd been willing to harm patients and destroy careers to protect their exploitation. "She could have helped us," Lena said quietly. "She had skills, experience, knowledge of the system. If she'd chosen differently, she could have been part of rebuilding something better." "Some people can't let go of power," Patricia said. "Even when holding it destroys them." 6 months after the arrests, Riverview Medical Center held a rededication ceremony. The hospital had been fully renovated, new equipment, updated facilities, expanded capacity. The toxic culture had been replaced with one focused on collaboration, transparency, and patient-centered care. Patient outcomes had improved measurably. Mortality rates down. Infection rates down. Patient satisfaction scores up significantly. And perhaps most importantly, Staff retention had gone from 30% annual turnover to less than 8%. Nurses wanted to work at Riverview now. It had become a destination hospital, known for treating staff well and prioritizing quality care over profit margins. The ceremony was attended by hundreds: hospital staff, patients and families, community leaders, state healthcare officials, and representatives from the 67 other hospitals implementing similar reforms across Aegis's network. Marcus Hale spoke first, fully recovered and energetic. Healthcare transformation doesn't happen in boardrooms or strategic planning sessions. It happens at bedsides, in moments of crisis, when people choose integrity over convenience. What we're celebrating today started with one nurse who made one choice. Everything else followed from that. Margaret Willis spoke next, detailing the governance changes and financial transparency measures now in place. We betrayed this community's trust. Rebuilding it required complete honesty about our failures and total commitment to change. That's what you see here today. Not perfection, but genuine dedication to being better. Then Lena took the podium, looking out at hundreds of faces, some familiar, many new, all connected by their investment in making healthcare work the way it should. 2 weeks into this job, someone threatened to destroy my career if I didn't back down. They said fighting corruption wasn't worth the cost. Lena paused. They were wrong. Every single day I see the cost of not fighting. Patients who get better care because nurses have time to truly attend to them. Staff who go home at the end of their shifts instead of working mandatory overtime. Families who trust that their loved ones are receiving treatment based on medical need, not budget constraints. She looked at the nurses gathered in the front rows. Ashley, Diane, Catherine, Tom, and dozens of others who'd supported the changes even when success seemed impossible. I'm not a hero. I'm a nurse who got lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time to make a difference. But each of you is making that same difference every single day. Every time you advocate for a patient. Every time you speak up about unsafe conditions. Every time you choose what's right over what's easy. That's how systems change. Not through grand gestures, but through thousands of small acts of integrity that accumulate into transformation. She finished a standing ovation that felt less like applause for her personally and more like collective celebration of what they'd all built together. After the ceremony, Lena walked through the hospital, visiting each unit, talking with staff, checking on patients. In the ICU, she found Eleanor Marsh visiting her former nurse. "Ms. Hart," Eleanor waved her over. "I was just telling Sarah here about the press conference, how you stood up there and set everyone straight about that fake chart." "I had help from you, Mrs. Marsh. Your testimony made the difference." "Well, you saved my life. Least I could do was help save yours." Eleanor smiled. "I hear you're staying here instead of taking those fancy jobs everyone's offering. This is where I belong, where I can do the most good." That's what I told my daughter. She wanted to know why you weren't going to some big city hospital or working for Aegis Corporate. I said because real leaders don't chase titles. They go where they're needed most. Later, as evening settled over the city, Lena stood in her office, finally feeling like her office, reviewing the week's schedule. 3 new initiatives launching, 2 policy implementations, 1 community partnership. The work never stopped, but it mattered in ways she could see and measure. Her phone rang. "Patricia." "Turn on Channel 7. National News." Lena grabbed the remote, finding the broadcast. A feature story about healthcare reform, showcasing Riverview as a model for systematic change. Interviews with patients whose care had improved. Staff members describing the difference proper support made. And Lena herself, filmed during a shift, providing patient care while explaining how frontline experience informed her administrative decisions. The segment ended with the anchor's commentary. In an era of healthcare crisis, Riverview Medical Center offers a blueprint for transformation, not through top-down mandates or corporate restructuring, but through empowering the people who actually deliver care to lead the changes they know are needed. It started with one nurse choosing a stranger's life over her own advancement. It became a movement that's changing how we think about healthcare leadership across the country. Lena turned off the television, sitting in the quiet of her office as darkness gathered outside. 1 year ago, she'd been a night shift nurse preparing for another routine shift, anonymous and comfortable in her invisibility. Now she was the director who'd exposed corruption, survived character assassination, helped send criminals to prison, and rebuilt a hospital's culture from the ground up. The person she'd been at that airport terminal wouldn't recognize who she'd become. But that person, the one who'd knelt on cold tile and chosen to help instead of walking away, was still at the core of everything. Her phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. "Congratulations on the ceremony. You've built something remarkable. Proud to have played a small part in making it possible." Lena typed back. "You didn't play a small part. You gave me a chance when everyone else said I wasn't qualified. That changed everything." His response came quickly. "You proved you were qualified every day since. The chance just revealed what was already there." She looked around her office at the photos now decorating the walls, staff celebrations, patient thank you cards, newspaper clippings documenting the transformation. Evidence of work that mattered, of choices that led somewhere meaningful. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Healthcare reform was never finished, never complete. There would always be more problems to solve, more barriers to overcome, more resistance to push through. But tonight, Lena allowed herself to feel satisfaction, to acknowledge that a single choice, to save a dying stranger instead of boarding a plane, had cascaded into systematic change that would affect thousands of lives for years to come. She'd missed her flight to a conference that might have advanced her career. Instead, she'd saved a life that saved a hospital that became a model for transforming healthcare itself. Some missed flights, it turned out, were exactly where you were supposed to end up. Lena packed up for the evening, turned off the lights, and walked through the hospital toward the exit. Nurses waved as she passed. Patients and families smiled. The building hummed with the energy of people doing meaningful work in an environment that finally supported them properly. Outside, the parking lot was quiet under sodium lights. Lena climbed into her car, the same car she'd driven to the airport that morning 2 weeks ago, though it felt like years, and headed home. Not to rest. Tomorrow would start early with staff meetings and policy reviews, but to pause, to reflect, to appreciate that sometimes the most important journeys begin when you choose someone else's destination over your own, and that real leadership isn't about titles or recognition or career advancement. It's about showing up when it costs everything, fighting when resistance seems overwhelming, and building something better even when people say it's impossible. Lena Hart had done all three, and she was just getting started.